Guys, we specialize in helping people develop their superpowers in the office with the Power Platform, specifically Canvas Power Apps, but we'll eventually sort of branch out in these other things. But what does C Sharp have to do with the Power Platform? And Kurt, Rick, I would say that it gives you superpowers. It allows you to do things that a mere mortal of a Power Apps creator gives you superpowers to do all kinds of stuff that you're not able to do. What do you guys think of that?
Sorry.
Well, I know we're talking about C Sharp, but I've always been partial to programming in the key of G.
Well, there is F Sharp.
Little music humor. I'm sorry, went over your head there.
No, Rick, that was perfect. I love that. And Kurt, your enthusiasm is coming. I just need you to tone it down a little bit.
Well, I'm still trying to figure out combo boxes. So, I'm kind of just trying to catch up, man.
Now, guys, watch Kurt's demeanor on his face as we delve into this. But before we start, guys, I've got a special little video to show you that I prepared for you. It may not seem like it took much time, but it actually took a lot of time to do this. So here we go. You guys ready?
This isn't going to go well for me. I have a feeling. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Kurt.
Ever wondered why learning a little bit of C# can be beneficial for someone like you, a Power Apps creator? Well, sit back and enjoy this because we're about to look closer at C# and its benefits for those who want to master Power Apps in a more complete way. Imagine being able to develop things that take your Power App solutions to the next level and set you apart from others. This is exactly what learning C# can bring to a Power Apps creator. C# is the main language for coding with Microsoft Technologies. The code you've been writing in Power Apps has been preparing you for and isn't too far off from C# coding.
This means you can develop, debug, and maintain your app more easily. It's really a time saver in the long run.
In the world of Power Apps, being able to customize and extend is a real game changer. With C#, you gain the capability to create your own custom connectors. Imagine that. This enables you to integrate with virtually any service that exposes an API. This opens up a world of possibilities for your apps, allowing you to integrate with a wide variety of software and services. Big time. Writing your own plugins and connectors can significantly enhance the functionality of your or your coworkers' apps, enabling you to create more complex and powerful solutions to impress your boss or clients. But the benefits don't stop there. C# also enables you to create Azure functions, a key component of serverless computing. This can be particularly useful when you need to run code in response to events, such as changes to data in a database, or when you need to run compute-intensive tasks. Now, consider the potential to leverage the .NET framework. With C# and .NET, you can develop robust, scalable, and secure applications that can handle high volumes of users and data. This is a real game changer for Power Apps developers, allowing them to create enterprise-level or what I call big boy solutions. But what about the learning curve, you might ask? Well, C# is a statically typed language, meaning that the type of every variable is set to a certain type and not so loosey-goosey like they are in Power Apps. This can make it easier to spot errors early in the development process, making your coding journey smoother and more efficient. I hope you see now that learning C# as a Power Apps creator empowers you with vast more tools to create supernatural and powerful apps. It can open up a world of possibilities, allowing you to tie in a huge variety of services, write connectors or plugins for Power Apps, but also you can create Azure functions. Look into that one. With its statically typed nature, C# can also make your coding journey smoother and more efficient. So why not take the plunge and start your journey with C#? It could well be the key to unlocking your full potential as a Power Apps developer. After all, in the world of technology, the only constant is change, and learning is the key to staying ahead of the curve. And I'm here to guide you all the way through it all. Welcome to a whole new way of developing your superpowers in the office. Thanks, guys.
A whole new world. I'm sorry. Are you guys going to give me a thumbs down for that? A little karaoke moment there. All right. So why are we doing this? Why are we even talking about C#? Well, we have started a new community based upon building a brand new application template. And there are some really exciting things that we can do. I'm making I got this thing called the ultimate jumpstart kit. This thing is going to be the ultimate Power Apps template. And in order to make the very best template that the world has ever seen, I want to use that. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to learn C# to use the template. No. But if I'm documenting every step of the process of building this ultimate Power Apps template. And hey, if you're sort of interested in more coding, I would assert that learning 2 languages at the same time. So we got PowerFX, and Kurt says I'm still trying to learn the drop down control. So in this analogy, I could show you a combo box in C#, and we could talk about the differences and stuff. So back in the day, actually it was 2001, Valentine's Day, to be exact, Windows XP was released, and also Microsoft .NET was released, unless my memory fails me there. Okay, so Amber liked my video. How about that, guys? I know Kurt and Rick, you didn't like it, but Amber likes it, which is really what's important here for me. And then Shell says good morning. And make sure I've got my screen up here. There we go. What is this, Kurt? Does this look familiar at all to you?
Yeah.
I need you to tone down your excitement, Kurt. I mean, really, this is a live stream. Everything needs to be very, very serious here. So,
Okay.
okay. Let me show you how I got here. First of all, this is Microsoft Visual Studio. Kurt, which is older, you or this Visual Studio project, would you say?
Okay. Could you repeat that?
Sure, absolutely. Which is older, you or Visual Studio? How long has Visual Studio been around? And which would you say is older, you or it?
It's been around for a while. It's been around since the 90s, right?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. It used to be Borland. Borland was the big deal, and they had their stuff, and then Microsoft Visual Studio came out. Actually, it was Visual C, and that was their editor. And then Visual Studio came out because they were trying to create an editor that could handle all of them. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so it's pretty neat. It's very powerful. It's almost as good as the Visual Basic editor.
Yeah, I might be able to convert you here. So guys, you can. I had the Enterprise Edition as a complimentary from Microsoft. I guess in appreciation of being recognized by them as an MVP. It's one of the perks. You get a full Enterprise. I don't know that I've ever had the Enterprise Edition, but now I do. Usually I just maybe spring for the Pro, or when I had a job, the employer would make sure we all have Pro editions. But you as an individual, you can go download and use Visual Studio Community Edition. And don't ask me what the difference is. But professional is better than community because you got to pay for it, right? You get what you pay for. And then Enterprise is like, you got to call them for the pricing. It's so expensive, I think.
So what have you seen, just real quick, what have you seen that's different between the Pro and the Enterprise since you have the Enterprise now, or have you had an opportunity to look at it that much yet?
I have not noticed any difference. And that's why I say, hey, don't ask me, because
it
all looks the same to me. So I'm sure there's some type of features that speed up things, maybe code generators or something like that.
Probably,
yeah. So once you install it, you open up Visual Studio, you will see something like this. Not only am I using, by the way, 2022, this is not 2 years old. This is not some crusty version of Visual Studio. This is the very latest version of Visual Studio. So pay no attention to the year there. It really doesn't mean too much. Not only do I have the latest version, but I'm using like the preview edition. So this is like hot off the press edition, but it looks exactly the same to me as I open up Visual Studio for the first time when .NET came out. And dare I say, it looks very similar to what we had with Visual Basic before .NET, and also Visual C++, Visual InterDev. So Visual InterDev was a Microsoft product that we used if you were a web developer doing ASP, just classic ASP. And then when .NET came out, it's like, I don't know, they got a great idea. They just threw it all into one thing. And I could write C++, F#. And Rick, you'd be excited to know that G flat is actually supported if you could just find you know the documentation on how to install it. So let's see here. I'm going to close that down. Okay, so this is what we have. I want you guys to understand. By the way, a lot of times what people do is they'll pick up a book on how to code with C# or whatever. Okay, they pick up a book and they open this up and they're like, okay, start with a console app. I hate console apps. In fact, that's how I met Kurt, because I was in a COBOL programming class. My logic instructor says, hey, I asked him, hey, which language should I get into now that I've learned logic here with you? He's like, COBOL. It's been around for 50 years. Will be around for another 50 years. And you know what? He's probably right. I mean, so that was probably 1996. And I, 50 years from, there'll be what, 2046? I'm sure COBOL will still be around. There's so many old systems that have been written in it. I don't know that they teach it anymore. And I know for large enterprises that have mainframes and use COBOL, those COBOL programmers that have that skill can probably make. I'm just guessing here, guys. 74% of statistics are made up out of thin air, out of somebody's mind. I would dare to say, on the upper end, maybe COBOL programmers are, because back in the day when I got on the Visual Basic train, after Y2K. Maybe even more right before the Y2K, because they had to fix that bug. We're making somewhere between $100,000 to $200,000 a year. I would guess. I mean, it would just be a simple Google search, right? But if we were to take a guess, if somebody, how much you guess? Like I see the number. How much would you guess? I would say $500,000 a year, which you can do in almost any technology like cybersecurity, coding, whatever. If you're best of the best, you can't be an average bear, as Kurt would say. So now
Hey,
I will go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt your thing. I'm just kind of trying to see how you started this screen up here. Is this what type of an app is that when you come into Visual Studio? What kind of app is that? Is that like your basic app or?
So this is like the screen that comes up when you open up Visual Studio, and you'll have all of your other projects here if you pin them. Okay, so let's go create a new project and let's see all the options that we have here. See, Mark says WPF. Now, Mark, what is that? WPF, is that Windows Presentation Framework? I believe that's what that was. I looked into that.
It's
probably
it's a foundation, isn't it? Isn't WPF a foundation? No.
Google search away. Yeah. Anybody wants to Google it and let us know. I'm managing all kinds of things over here. You guys probably don't want me distracted, right? So let me show you all these here. So I like Windows Forms. It feels just like Visual Basic. And what I did when .NET came out, I'm trying to circle back to why I went down these little tangents. When .NET came out, I picked up a book from O'Reilly. It was a little pocket handbook. and it was Pocket Handbook for both C# and VB.net of how you do everything. And they would say, this is how you create a variable in Visual Basic, and this is how you create it in C#. Now, I was already familiar with VB6, and a lot of the VB6 stuff looked almost exactly the same in VB.net. So I'm like, yeah, of course, that's how I would do that. And now, there were a lot more types and stuff, so I need to be updated on that. But the thing was just like a 150 page pocket book, really small. And yeah, we're just keeping up on all this stuff, all the chats going on there. What was I saying, Kurt? I'm sorry.
You were talking about Windows Forms, and you were talking about there was 150 of something.
Oh yeah, that book was about 150 pages. Thank you, Kurt. It shows you how mentally challenged I am, or how bad my ADD is. So I was learning VB.net from this book, but it was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh yeah, I create an array this way now. Okay, what was really useful was how you do it in C#. Now I had already coded a little bit in JavaScript, and I had classes in C and C++ at the community college where I met you. Okay, and the angle brackets. I'm sorry, the curly brackets. And the semicolons and things, they didn't scare me away, didn't look too hard. In fact, as I was learning C# from this little book, I started to like it better than Visual Basic. So Kurt, if you had a code right now in .NET, would you go back to your trusted Visual Basic because you really like the syntax, or maybe even nostalgia, or would you just go straight to C#?
I would go to C#. I mean, there's really little difference in the syntax if you think about it, but I mean, C# is just more. The entire C language is just more flexible.
Yeah, what got me away from Visual Basic to drop it like a hot potato was that I was able to do everything that C# developers were doing in .NET, but they were making like 20% more than Visual Basic .NET programmers. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
And little by little, C# seemed to be the thing. Like VB was just sort of abandoned. Like if you try to look for some .NET code, you can do stuff in C++, of course C#, VB, F#. I didn't even think they created some other ones, like third parties can come in. Like there's a COBOL.NET, which blows my mind.
I think that, sorry, I thought maybe you might have been done in that moment, but
No, you're good.
I think what the difference is, I think Visual Basic, because most of the time people are just trying to slap some stuff together. They're trying to get a program done across the board. But I think what makes this, what puts C# back, or C, I call it C. C# is just a flavor of C, which is C++ and C#. So C#, what brought it back into the limelight was the editor, okay, the Visual Studio editor, I believe, because the Visual Basic editor was pretty nice, and it was pretty fast to get around in. To code in C++ back in the day, it was really, you had to do a lot of code. There was a lot of code. You had to really think it through, so it was a lot harder. You couldn't get as much code done as fast. You couldn't get as much of the program completed in a day as you could in Visual Basic. So, but with that Visual Studio editor, dragging and dropping windows and coding C++ code or C code, just like you would Visual Basic, that's pretty amazing. And of course, now C# is it's an entire framework that's above all that. So it's above the C++. So there's a lot more packaged objects for that, so that makes it a little bit faster now, right? It's what brought it back. But Visual Studio, I think, is the key to that whole thing.
Yeah. Something that I noticed that came out of this is that little by little, it was like all the examples for .NET were all in C#. At first, Microsoft would put out both, and you might actually see, hey, at least with those 4 core ones, C++, C Sharp, VB, and F Sharp. You'll see, examples of those, but like blog entries and stuff, I don't know. I just don't see as much VB stuff hardly at all. So anyway, C Sharp is the main thing that they focus out of those 4, it seems, for the masses, and what you're going to find out here is there's actually a lot of similarities between C Sharp and PowerFX. Okay. So the whole reason me bringing up the story of how I learned C Sharp and VB at the same time from that little book, I believe it sort of supercharges your learning, like if maybe, not at first, but if one at least a little bit, you can, I believe it sort of speeds it up. So it's sort of like akin to like, okay, I don't, maybe I've been taking piano lessons. Now I'm going to go back to the beginning lessons I had in piano, and I'm going to pull out my cello that I don't know how to use, and I'm going to try to do all these exercises that I've mastered on the piano and do them with the cello. So that's just another example of that. So the story I was going into at the community college was I did sign up for COBOL. I did take Mr. Lake's advice, and I signed up for COBOL, and I was in there. So there was instruction. I actually bought some extra. Of course, Kurt and I, we had an addiction to just going and buying new books down at Borders and Barnes and Noble around that time.
Yeah. And
so I'd pick up a COBOL for Dummies book to sort of help me in that class. But man, it was time to go to labs. The instructor didn't have a pattern. That's something that stood out. I probably never told you this, Kurt. What stood out to me so much and made me want to like follow you everywhere, like little puppy, just like anything you had to say. You had an enthusiasm. You were always enthusiastic about whatever you're talking about, and it made that class so much more fun.
Yeah,
so much more. And I would say you're the best instructor that I've ever had from there. So a COBOL application sort of has like a black screen, or I'm sure you could have like black and neon green and whatever, but you just got like 2 colors if you include the black that's everywhere. And it looks like a console application. So I really don't like console applications. It's like, is it really that hard to create? We are in 2024. Can we get away from all this? Now I understand if you need a command line, you got a batch, or you got some code that needs to run. But I don't know. I think that maybe we could create a better console. Not that we're going to do that here or anytime soon. But I like to build Windows applications. If I build something and I want somebody to use it, I don't want them to go to a command line and go into a directory. Do you guys remember about 2 live streams ago, we were trying to use that SOPA tool to crack open the MSApp files and then to read a package? So that's why I'm going down this road, is because I want a Windows app I want to hit browse. I'm going to go look at an MSApp file. I'm like, crack this open, extract it there. And then I can make changes to the code, and then I could bring up this tool that we build and package it back up and upload it to Power Apps,
Yeah. Since you're going down some nostalgia here, I mean, if you think about it, COBOL and RPG, that they were all built for a System 36, the IBM's structured mainframes, and they had dumb terminals. They were basically just keyboards that were hooked up to this machine. And the way they had to do things, you got to remember, this was developed in the 60s and actually before then. But I mean, COBOL was mainstream. The System 36 and 38s, they came around in the 60s. And back then, telecommunication was nothing but going across phone lines. And back then, they didn't have the character set developed yet. People were just, computers were still in its infancy. And they had this thing called the ASCII, and back then it was EBCDIC with the character set for the mainframe.
Did you just
and it was going, huh?
I said, did you just cuss?
I know it almost sounds like a bad word, doesn't it? But where's it going? So
Right.
these characters were going across the phone line, and being interpreted. There was a modem being connected from one side to the next. These dumb terminals on a mainframe were actually an extension of a phone line, and they were you were sending it across. That's why SQL is structured the way it is. It's because those select statements. You would do a select star from blah blah blah. That would literally go across the phone line to the mainframe, and it would go out there and it would get that stuff, and then it would bring the data back in that same character format. So the packets were just basic. It's like you could literally out type it. Back then it was like 300 baud speed, which means I could probably type on a good day. I could type faster than that thing. Could go.
That's a
across
word
the
I
line.
haven't heard in millennia. Baud speed.
Yeah. So it did a lot for back then, but since then, when the PC came around and we started getting graphics card, we started getting extended ASCII characters, what you couldn't even do a border. You know how you got extended characters? You can look, if you look at your like your char set data set, you can see like the double edges of a border. You couldn't, to program a screen like we do today in Windows, it would take months, literally months, man, to try to do that on a mainframe, So back then, so the development of software and the development of character sets has changed everything. Now we have an ASCII set that can actually deal with all the languages of the world.
Right.
So we've really come a long way.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that, Kurt. I want to show, I think this is along I'm trying to answer the question that you answered a few minutes ago, which is, okay, how'd you get there? Or what are all the different project types? So there's 3 different filters here. If you can see, boom. So you pick your language, or you can just say all languages. Okay. In this case, I'm just going to say C#. Now realize we still do have VB down here. Okay. Yeah, we got Python. I guess we could write some Python code in Visual Studio. I'm going to pick C# here, and then you can just filter it down. If you want to write a Windows app, you can do that. Okay, and some of these are web, some of them are not. So if you don't want the the web versions of stuff, I would pick desktop, and then these are the choices. Now, I like Windows Form app. That is most like VB, and I could probably talk about and do things there without having to do any research or anything. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on with my camera because this new computer setup, it's really sort of messed me up. You see, I've got you did see that I had my headset on, right?
Yeah.
Because my microphone doesn't work for some reason. Okay, that's on there. Okay, and hopefully I'm gonna pop up here in a second. Perhaps. And I've got one more thing I can try.
That was a pretty good workshop yesterday. Anybody here that was in the workshop yesterday?
Oh, it was.
We got a lot accomplished, I felt like.
Yeah. Creating visually striking dashboards in Power Apps.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Elegant dashboards.
I'm trying to get myself to work here. Yeah, Mark says, can't wait for the code. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep on running. You guys don't need to see my face. But if Kurt is able to whenever he feels like talking on a topic, then I'll go back to seeing if I can fix that. But right now I'm just going to keep moving on here.
Well, okay. So Mark, when you were talking about can't wait for the code, are you talking about for the workshop? So, okay. So I was just trying to respond to his comment there.
Okay,
go ahead there.
Cool. Yeah. As you were talking, I'm like, okay, now I can work on this camera thing. and then you start talking.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah,
I'm,
Mark
I'm
says,
back.
you got it. Mark says from the workshop, he said, top notch as usual. That's what I'm talking about.
I like that. Now,
Oh,
Mark, would you say it was elegant or? Yeah, we like the word elegant. Okay, so let's get this thing done here. So what I did was I hit Windows Format. Okay, now you could have done a. Why is this pop-up popping up? I guess that's what pop-ups do, right?
Yeah.
Oh, technology has been kicking my butt lately. Nothing to do with my
It does me
technology.
all the time.
All right. So I went with Windows Form app. Now
Okay.
how I understand things. Now my fingers aren't on the pulse of C# development anymore. I'm like totally focused on Power Apps. Okay.
Yeah.
But my understanding is if you go with .NET Framework, then that's only going to perhaps work on Windows. There are probably nuances to that, like I don't know, maybe specific versions of mobile devices would run it. I'm not sure. But then they came out with this Core. So
Yeah.
if I go up here and look for Core, now Core is meant to be, I believe it's like all open source, and so you'll see these Core things here.
The way I understand it's a stripped down version. So that started with the form and then the core came. They stripped down MVC. So it's just your model view controller, right?
No, it should run on any operating. Yes, you do have ASP.NET versions of it. The MVP. So the MVC model view controller. So again, that's just an ASP.NET type of project. And whenever you see ASP.NET, know that it is going to be a web application,
Okay.
which might sound good to us, but I want to run something on Windows that will go to my hard drive, open things up, and and I might be able to set like or you would call it a terminal stay resident, right? Or you'd have a
Terminate but
Windows.
stay resident. Yeah, TSR.
Mhm. And so the equivalent would be I could create a service, a Windows service that has no UI, just sits in the background, and it could look at a folder. And if I drop any MS app files there, it's going to extract them, boom, put them over here.
Yeah.
And then if I ever drop code into a folder, it can monitor that and then repackage it. So at any time as I'm building, some code or doing some of this stuff, it would just automatically have all those files generated on the fly. That would be really cool.
Well, think about it, Darren, the difference between being able to have an application developed directly on your computer compared to a web app. I mean, look at how Windows has, Word and Outlook and all that. They have the app that can sit on your computer, and it's a more robust design. It's stronger. It's got more features. It's a more rich thing. You're not relying on the browsers, right? So
Right.
there's a difference there, isn't there?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you select to get to this point here. You selected a Windows Form app, just
Mhm.
straight standard app. Then is
Yep.
what you did.
Yeah. So I had core typed in there, but yeah. So instead of going with the .NET framework, I'm assuming that this might be, but I don't know for sure that it would be a core app. So I sort of like, if I build an app like this, I would sort of like it to be able to run on a Macintosh or a Linux distribution. So that was the thoughts behind the one that I picked there. So after you pick a WinForm Windows type of project, you should see something that looks like this. And the first thing that you'll want to do, and guys, if you've ever wanted to know C#, what I was planning on doing is going over the basics and contrast it between, hey, this is how you create a variable in Power Apps, right? Well, this is how you do it in C#. So you'll notice the differences. So if you ever wanted to learn C#, you'll have a leg up. You could put that in resume and say, maybe you don't have experience in C#, but I've been exposed to it. I know how to do the basics, create variables, do loops, if then else's, all that type of stuff. So you'll have all those things in any programming language. So if you know like a good set of, Kurt, would you say maybe a dozen different topics handling variables, loops, if then else, or which is called branching. Sometimes loops is called iteration. I'm trying to think what other basics of any language.
So right, so defining your variables, defining your memory, your scope, understanding scope, because every language has a different way of handling it. Your conditional branching, your iteration, and your language statements. Right now, when you're working with C, you're dealing more with, you're learning how to create user-defined functions and procedures.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So. But in any language, if you understand iteration, you understand conditional branching, and you understand statements, assignments, you can program in any language. Those are your three big ones, right?
Okay. And of course, I'm not able to type as fast as we talk here. So the first three that I mentioned, variables.
Yeah.
And might I say, probably the first thing, you need to be able to display information. Usually the first thing that you always learn with any coding language you're trying to learn, it's always going to be a hello world, wouldn't it be?
Yeah.
So I would say like
what is the syntax to display information? Every language seems to have a different syntax in displaying their information, right?
Yeah, so basic syntax. So what would you say, Kurt? When somebody says syntax,
The command language. Your commands,
language.
the commands, like, so like C has like 38 commands or something like that, that you can use.
So I'm going to say rules or commands of the language in question. So you got variables, you have looping, which is also called iteration. Then we've got if, then else, which is also called branching.
Conditional branching.
Yeah. What were the 5 or 8 things that you mentioned after I said those?
I did that. Underneath that, I guess variables, but there's a little bit to that, right? It's not only is it assignment of variables, but it's also understanding the scope, the scoping of variables. Where can the computer see it in your program? Where can that variable live in that program, depending on your assignment? And then you've got procedures. Functions and procedures, right?
Absolutely.
And C is pretty much just functions, but in traditional languages, it's procedures are different than functions, but really they do the same thing. They set their subroutines, right? You're learning how to create subroutines that go out and do tasks. You're breaking your big program down into baby programs, right?
Absolutely.
And then in these days, you got to learn objects, right? You got to understand the concepts of OOPS. Object-oriented principles.
Oops.
Yeah.
I don't know if I did this on a live stream, but when I worked for the state of Florida, there was somebody, a nice gal, and all of us were asked to present on something. She wanted to present on object-oriented programming, and she didn't want to have to say that over and over again. Usually, if you don't want to say it, you don't actually pronounce the acronym, like squeal. Some people say sequel. No, Kurt said, "Hey, if we're gonna like pronounce the whole acronym as if it was a word, it really should be squeal." I thought that was hilarious when you would tell me that, man. And like when we talk about Visual Basic, if we want to shorten it, do we say VB?
Right, that's true. That's true, Darren. That's a good point. We
Yeah.
don't say VB, do we? No, we say VB. So you don't say oops, Kurt. You say OOP.
Otherwise, if you were going around and talking to people, Urs, I gotta go like talk to Urs. Like, what are you talking about? the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS.
What's going
So,
on
yeah,
this morning? We're not having a whole lot. Nobody's talking. Everybody's sleeping still.
let's see if Rick's up. There's Rick.
There's Rick.
Yeah, I woke up.
He
Hey,
fell asleep.
I'll be right back, guys. Be right back. Hold
Oh,
on.
I had to come back because I heard Kurt was cussing.
and of
Fake
course,
news.
once you come in, he's got to leave. Like, I'm trying to run a live stream here, guys. So this girl would say at the top of every time normally somebody would say object oriented programming or OOP, she would just say oops. And how you work with oops is object, and I forgot a J in there. Okay, so objects. And so I'm going to go in and sort of define some more of this stuff. I'll put this on the side so you can see everything. Yeah, so you've got the basic rules. Like, let's say you got curly braces, keywords, operators, so on and so forth. Operators are things like if you want to do addition, use a plus, minus, division. No, I don't want to do that. And then multiplication. Now, variables assign it. So we're setting the value of a variable, but then there's evaluation, which is getting the value of a variable. Okay, so within Power Apps, we have set because we're setting the value of a variable. And what I should say is PowerFX. Okay, I'm going to put that on my clipboard because I'm saying that a lot. Now, getting at the value within PowerFX is you just reference the name of the variable. I'll say PowerFX or anywhere. Really. And when I mean anywhere or any language is what I mean by that. I'll say or virtually any language. Somebody will find a language where that's not true, and then I'll experience the pain of being wrong. So looping in PowerFX, we have got for all timers. But with C#, we've got like a for function we can use, a for construct. You have while. You have, I don't know if there's an until. There is in Visual Basic. I don't remember if it has in C# there.
Right. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just while. I think it's just a while. In C#.
Just while. Okay.
I think so.
But yeah, between while and for, those are really powerful. You can do all kinds of really interesting things.
You don't need to do anything else. Yeah.
Ezra's trying to get in. Hi, baby boy. Hi. I'll come out in a little bit later today, okay? All right. He loves all my lights. And so anyway, in C# with an if, you actually have the keyword if, else, and watch Kurt's face break.
Well, you have switch too, right? So.
Oh, that's true.
And we don't have break. Break is not a conditional branch. It's not part of conditional branching it whatsoever.
Oh, it should be up here in looping break?
No, it shouldn't be there either. Break should have its own classification called weak programming concept break.
It, guys, in Kurt's coding religion, this is blasphemy to use a break.
It is.
And he's taught me whenever you have a block of code, it should have one entrance point and one exit point.
Yeah.
Made perfect sense to me. I would never use break, and if I was tempted to use a break, I got a little curd on my shoulder. It's like, are you smart enough to structure this code so you don't have to use the break? Really,
There you
Darren?
go. Now, let me ask you, because you've done this, you've been working for the last 20 years. Have you ever found a situation where you could not program without using that break? Did you have to do the break? Have you ever found that? Isn't that
Nope.
something?
Feels
Isn't that
screwed out.
something? That's what a real programmer does, man.
Now, the majority or the consensus out there for coders, programmers, is that no, you should, at the very top of the code, you should say, hey, if this is the condition, or if this happens, then just leave the procedure, and you'll do an exit or a break. A return. If you want to return out of a function, you could just use the keyword return. And you
Yeah.
taught me, no, your return should be one line of code at the very bottom of your, you know.
Yeah.
So let's say we wanted to put some cleanup code or something. If we have 10 different breaks in there for different conditions, it's just gonna like jet. It's gonna get out of there. You're like, whoa, I need to clean up my objects, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. Now the consensus or the coding industry would say, well, do or do all this if, and then the break before you do any initializations of objects.
Yeah.
And it's like, that just and I just hear Kurt saying, well, that's sloppy code. That's it's ugly code. It's dare we say people don't like to be called, have a label of spaghetti code put on their code or their project. That's like a bad word. If you're writing spaghetti code, you don't know what you're doing, is the general consensus. But they don't believe using break lends itself to turning into spaghetti code. And both Kurt and I believe it. I think it makes total sense. Where's Matt when we need him?
And there's just no nice way of telling somebody that, I've literally almost had fights. I mean, people wanting to beat me up because I told them that their code was junk. This guy,
in everybody's defense, you call them baby programmers when they do that.
I guess, but I just remember this one person wanted to collaborate with me and do project together. And he said, here's my source code that I've got so far for the project. And I looked at it. I looked at it for 5 seconds, Darren. And I said, this is junk. He says, no, it's not. I said, look at all these breaks you have in here. You have breaks everywhere. Well, that's how you code. I said, no, it's not. And I mean, it was literally a fight, And I mean, bless his heart, he just didn't know what he didn't understand, And I literally had my C++ instructor. People teach this. They teach this in the colleges. They teach break. And I remember going to my instructor, and he was taking points off because I didn't use a break. And I told him that. I said, you know what? Those are the best points I've ever lost. I literally told him that. Those are the best points I've ever lost, and I'll lose them again, And
if you use that in Kurt's class, I don't think you could pass Kurt's class if you used any breaks, to be honest.
Nope.
It makes you a better programmer, whether you use them down the line or not. Maybe you have to maintain people's code, and that's the general census, so you're going to see it. But just the fact that you've gone through a period of time where you force yourself not to use that, it just makes you a better programmer.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Right, you have control of your program. If you have breaks, you don't have control. You don't have control. And it's just like we talk about with the switch statement, having an else in there. You don't put an else in a switch statement, or a case statement. You have no control. You're saying you got sloppy stuff coming in there then,
Yeah. So the first thing to do in our project, of course, is to do a hello world, right? So in order to do that, what we need, like let's say we want to drop a button here. We're all Power Apps developers here, right? So how can I add a button to this thing? You think it would be here by default. The only thing that's over here on default is data sources. I don't want to deal with data sources yet. So you go up to view and you go down here to toolbox. Does that seem familiar, Kurt? A toolbox.
Yeah,
Oh, it's
It's
got to
starting-
initialize it.
it's starting to come to me. Oh, look at there. Ain't that something?
Maybe that's why they don't turn on by default. Here's all Windows control, controls we can use for. So guys, look at this. There's no, oh, here's classic and here's modern. No, there's just one version of it and they work really well. Okay. So I'm looking for a button, which is the third item. I'm just going to double click, or if you single select, you can draw the button however big you want it to be. I don't like doing that. I like to double click because I think it's nice. So at this point, this is starting to feel like Power Apps, isn't it? I mean, we've got a little insert thing off to the side within Power Apps. We got a lot more stuff. So here's they have it categorized. So if you're just looking for common controls like a button, boom, look, I'm going to double click. Now I've got a checkbox, a checklist box, a combo box, a date time picker.
Hold down your thing.
Uh-huh.
You can hold down your left button and drag it over too, and it'll drop exactly where you want it to on the screen.
Yeah, I don't like doing that for some reason. I don't know what my problem is, but
Huh.
I guess what the thing is, it's like a button. I don't want it to be arbitrary. I want it to be standard. Okay. So within Power Apps, with an input control, or I think most of the controls, okay, if it makes sense, like for gallery, it doesn't make sense, but for a button, text box, label, that type of thing, I think the default is 40 pixels. And then over here, now get this, guys. Remember over in Power Apps, we got a property pane. Well, let's go over here to view and let's look at property window. Do we see any type of property window? Now I know a shortcut going back to Visual Basic days, it's F4. It's at the very bottom. Property. So this should be up by default if you ask me. This looks a little weird because it looks like this particular window is stuck in dark mode. That's very strange.
Huh.
And that's something that I should address now. There's a lot of people that love dark mode. So if you go to tools, you might think it would be over in the edit, but if you want to go into settings, I mean, Visual Studio's got so many menu items. You go down here to options. What's the very first thing here? Blue extra contrast. Let me just go with regular blue. Let's see if that makes a difference. Okay, I like that. Now, if you like dark mode, let me just show you what that would look like. Here we go. I don't care for that. Do you like that, Kurt?
No,
Rick, do
not
you
when
like
I'm
the dark
programming.
mode better?
Yeah, it's iffy.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna change this back. Tools, options. If you ever want to change up fonts, colors, all kinds of stuff, extensions, it's all here in options. In fact, look at all these different categories of options you have.
So you went to tools and then options for that.
Yeah.
We could just
Tools,
about do an entire
options,
workshop
yeah.
on and maybe a series of workshops on the Visual Studio Editor and just getting around Visual Studio. You
Mhm.
know,
Absolutely.
people.
What do you think about that as a workshop
I-
for this next Friday? Do you think
I
people would
love
be
it.
interested
I
in
love
that?
it. And well, if they're interested in this now, maybe we could talk about that. So, but yeah, I think Visual Studio Editor would be great. Even for people that just don't even want to do Power Apps, they just want to learn some Visual Studios. Maybe they want to work with Python or C# or something, but they want to learn the Visual Studio Editor.
Yeah.
So
I like it. So guys, if you're interested in either what Kurt just described or and I feel like we could throw a little bit of a few things in here that would be related. Okay, so more depth of anything that we cover here on the basics of C# that we don't get to, we could cover that, but we could talk about installing, using these menus, how to get things, how we would recommend setting things up, and so just like the basics of C# Visual Studio. And guys, leave comments. So I see there are quite a few of you tuned in the live stream, and I'll be watching the comments even after the live stream.
I'm sorry.
Put in the comments.
Well, Darren, as you're talking, it just my mind is thinking that is exactly what we should be doing, because you think about a lot of these people that are watching us today. They're Power Apps developers. They're trying to learn Power Apps, and they're we're going to say citizen developers, and they're trying to learn this thing. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about taking their skills to a whole another level. And the first thing we should probably learn is how to get around. Don't get overwhelmed with the editor. If you can't even open up the editor, then they're like, oh, I can't even get the editor. I'm not going to mess with that stuff. No, we want to make this thing easy for you, man. We want to make this thing fun. I love the idea of starting with the fundamental process of let's look at the editor and play with the editor. Yeah. Just as you were talking, those were thoughts that went through my mind.
Okay. Yeah, very good. So yeah, I encourage you guys to to voice what you would be interested in. There was one time, Kurt, I thought that everybody we got the ability to call store procedures natively inside of Power Apps. I'm like, oh my goodness gracious, everybody's gonna want to know this. And then I scheduled the workshop. Nobody signed up for it. I'm like, that's not a sexy topic.
It is. It's just advanced, right?
It is for Kurt and Darren and probably Rick. He's
right
on store procedures.
Yeah. He goes to the store.
In fact,
he goes to the store.
And what?
That's what he does with his procedures. His procedure is about going to the store.
I got my checklist. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to hear from you guys. How interested you guys would be in the Visual Studio and delving into C#, dipping your toe more than just this live stream. If you're only interested in Visual Studio, say that. If you're if you like both, say that. Or if there's something that's related here that we're not even mentioning, say that. So what I've learned running a business, there's this dark art, I refer to it as dark art, called marketing. You'll ask any expert. Let's say we go to Russell Brunson, and he actually has videos where he says this. Russell Brunson's the guy who founded ClickFunnels. If you guys have ever heard of ClickFunnels, and which is used to create landing pages, to buy things from businesses. He says, hey, is this a good ad? Or hey, is this good advertising copy? The wording in the ads, and is this a good headline? He goes, I don't know. Put it out there and spend $1,000 on ads and do an A/B test with what you did last time and see which one performs the best. And I sort of did that with the store procedure without knowing it, and I learned really fast. Nobody wants to know about how to do, and because we're going to delve into writing store procedures, not just calling them. So anyways. So let's do a hello world here, Kurt and Rick. So we got a button here that we're familiar with within Power Apps. We have a property pane off to the side.
Now that looks familiar to people who are familiar with Power Apps. That's going to be familiar to them is the property window, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, in Power Apps, you've got this thing on the left side with all your screens, right? You got your tree view. Let me show you the tree view. It's called the Solution Explorer. Okay, so you got a Form 1. This thing that we're seeing right here, this is a screen. This is, it has always been called a form. Now, in Power Apps, form to me and Kurt, and especially to Rick, is a bad word. But here in Visual Studio, form is the equivalent of a screen. Okay, so we got a button here. We have a label. Okay, so you guys probably have a good idea what we can do with these things, right? And so here's your whole tree view. And if you drill down into the tree view, look, we got this form 1. We keep drilling down. Okay, what are all these things? Okay, we have this form resx. Here's our button, and here's our label. And if you double click on it, you'll go to the code. So I'm going to minimize some of this stuff so we can actually see this.
Just look at it.
Okay. So here's the code. Now let's go back to the designer. And what I like to do is just double click on the button. Oh, there is our on select. Now, is that the only thing that the button has? Let's see here. I'm going to go back to the designer and show you guys something. So here's our tree view like we're used to in Power Apps. Over in properties, this is like our property pane. Okay. And we've got a lot of what we would call declarative type of properties as we have in Power Apps. But there's a little lightning bolt. Look at this. There's a little lightning bolt there. Do you see that? Okay, so escape, and I'm going to click on the lightning bolt. Here are all the events that you have access to for a button. You want to know if they hover over it, you can do it. You want to know when they double click as opposed to single click, you can do it. You want to know if they right click, there's all kinds of stuff. You can type it. If you have a text box and you want to know every single character, you want to have some code run on every keystroke, you've got an event for that. So that's why somebody like me, Kurt, and Rick, when we go into Power Apps and there's only like 2 event properties, and you're like, oh, these are the only 2 we have to play with? I'm like, oh.
Yeah, that is one of the struggles that I've had with Power Apps, is that there's, especially when it comes to data validation, when you're bringing in your you want to validate input from a text. I love things like the key press event, and you just don't have those things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. So how in Power Apps, Kurt, we always tell people, hey, if you're going to use that control and code, you definitely should give it a name, right? So let's look at this button here. When you drop over a button, it's called button 1. Look at that, button 1. And here are all the other controls that we have in the designer. That's this little drop down that we have there. Now there's 2 different ways of showing the properties. So I'm going to go back to properties with that wrench, and we could look at them categorized. Do you like the categorization? So we have the categorization of control properties in Power Apps by going to the Advanced tab. So that's nice. But these are all the categories. You can drill out. What I like is them not to be categorized, and I want them in alphabetical order. Oh, look, name is at the top because it has a parenthesis there. Okay, so here's our button. Now, remember we double-clicked on the button, and it started creating code. Look at the code that it gave us. Button 1 _ click. Is that good or is that bad? Well, in Power Apps, what you're used to is if we go in here and you know what? We're going to do the same exact thing that we would do in Power Apps. For a button, BTN for button. And then we'll give it a meaningful name. So I'm going to say hello. Okay, there we go. I changed the name. Now, what happens when I go back over to the code here in this tab? Oh, it still says button 1. What? So it's when you're dealing with a full stack real development platform, it's not as nice as what you have in Power Apps. Power Apps would have renamed that to button say hello.
Oh, wow.
But it didn't. Yeah. So what I do in this case is I'll take this thing out and I'll go back to the designer. Oh my goodness, now I just broke my program. You see how complicated this can get really quick? So I'm going to go back to my code and I'm going to undo that. And now my designer hopefully will work again. Maybe I've got to close this down. I mean, we could have clicked on the links that they had there. In order to bring the designer back up, I'm going to double click on form 1, and we still have problems. So I'm going to click on these, and what we have here, okay, this is called form 1. Okay, that should be fine. And then we have this initialize component, and I think we got some code in there that's all messed up now. So you see what happened. You see the pain. You learn from the burn.
Absolutely.
Right, Kurt, as you would say. If you don't follow good programming practices, man, you are going to be learning from the burn for a long time until you actually start adhering to these rules.
And we go back to the hardest thing in programming, naming things, right? You better name things
Yes.
right in the beginning, because otherwise it's going to be a hot mess, right?
Absolutely. There's actually a book out there on Amazon about I posted it here, and I sort of wanted to show it if I could find it really fast. But yeah, here we go. I found it over here in our community, free community, by the way. So if you haven't been here, look at this. Naming things. The hardest problem in software engineering is naming things.
Oh my gosh.
Is something else going on over there, or you're
Yeah.
upset that there's a book out there with that?
No, I'm just looking at this. I don't know. I don't even want to. So I tried to bring in a button and name it right away, and then go in and look, but it still got button 1_click, even though I changed the name of it.
So let's look into this, and I see that Amber learned in Java at college, so it struck my mind. Yeah, the whole public void. So C# was actually taken from Java. I'm just gonna say that. Yeah, they saw where Java was going. It was like this platform independent platform, and they created C# to sort of have, and so they took a lot of things from that. So yeah, the syntax is almost exactly like Java. So if you program in C#, you'd probably be able to pick up Java really quickly. The only real differences that I can attest to is that the libraries are different. The functions are different. But as far as in the syntax, they are probably almost exactly the same.
Good.
All right, so I am going to go look for this code right here. I want to see what's inside this. So I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to say go to definition, or you can hit F12. Oh, look at this. Here's a file out here called form1.designer.cs. Isn't that interesting? So it's this thing up here. So if I had double clicked on this, it would have brought it up. Now let's go look for red squigglies. Do we have any red squigglies? Okay. Okay, look at that. The name has been changed to button say hello. Ooh, look at this. Button 1_click. So anywhere, I'm going to double click on this name that I set. You see everything you do the designer? It's actually a code generator. You don't have to use a designer at all. You could be building this in VS Code that doesn't have cool designers like this.
Wow.
But you better know all this stuff that you'll need to change, So the text will be changed. In fact, I'm going to hit, as you have in Power Apps, you can do a Control F to find something in your code or the file that's open. But here I can do Control F as well. And also in Power Apps, there's a Control H that does, that's like the universal thing that happens in Notepad++ as well. And I think also Windows Notepad. Control F and Control H. So every time we see a button 1, we want to see button say hello. And there's these 2 buttons here. If you can see that, hit Control 1 here. Let's zoom it. See, there's 2 little buttons right beside that drop-down list. So the first one is replace next. If I hit that, what does it do? It replaces that one. And then it highlights the next one. And so this is a good thing to start with at first. to make sure, because if you hit replace all, you might end up with some problems. So just start off with this, replace one at a time. Okay, no more occurrences. Okay, that's good. So it's looking for this function. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is paste that there, and we should be good now. Now, if you want to know if there's any problems with your program, you have got you got to compile it. So it's with a language that has to be compiled. What it's going to do is it's going to turn your code into zeros and ones or whatever that the processor needs to understand your program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the build, and we have build solution. That's fine, but you know what happened? You know how in Power Apps we got a play button? Look at this. There's a play button right there. Or you can just hit F5. I'm going to hit F5. Look at this. And now it's going to show you all the steps of compiling this huge program that we just created, right? And so, yeah, it's going to be going here. Okay. And look at this. It ran the program. So we know that there's no errors or problems because it actually ran the program for us. Now, if I click on this button, that code is going to run. What code? This code that you see right here, which is nothing. Okay, so I'm going to hit exit there, and it's going to take me back to the code. Now, if you run it, you run this, and the program shows up, and you're like, oh, I know what I need to put here, and you start editing this. Used to be it wouldn't allow you to do that. It's like, oh, no, you're running this code, so it sort of makes it read-only. But obviously, they changed that. Okay, that's good to know. Now, how do you say hello here? We're going to be able to do something that you wish you could do in Power Apps. Are you guys ready for this? Now, we already learned that we should be naming our controls, right? So here we have this label 1. Okay, so I'm going to do a Control H on that, and I want this label to be named LBL display hello.
So what I hear you saying, Darren, is that when we're working with Visual Studio, Control F and Control H is going to be something that we're going to want to use a lot.
Yeah.
Unlike with Power Apps, where it goes through the trouble of changing everything for you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's something I've grown to love with Power Apps. The fact that it just takes care of all that. I'm like, wow. So that's what dealing with a low code type of tool does. Man, it does all of the grunt work for you that, but if you got to do it all manually, you almost feel like a hacker. Well, I got to do this. I got to do this. I mean, there's just a lot of busy work. I mean, just do a one screen application. I remember with Angular, man, I had to create the project. It was thousands of files. I mean, I had to do a command line and I felt like a hacker just creating a project. This and then you go and try to create a screen. Well, you got to create something over here. You got to create something over here. You got to put something in the manifest, and you got to go into the JSON file, and it was just ridiculous. But people learning coding these days, they just like, okay, this is how you code.
Yeah, I mean that's the way it was. I mean, so now just coming back, it's been a while since I've messed with this stuff. So now I got to go back, and I'm like, oh, and what's funny, Darren, is I went and I pushed the play button to make sure that my program worked. And I couldn't find the form. It's because it was over on a different monitor. I'm over here looking because I'm used
you need
to
another. I'll buy you another screen, Kurt. Just say the word. I'll have it by your house by the end of the day.
I'm fine. So it's interesting because you're used to in Power Apps. You're used to when you hit play, it's going to run it right there in the editor for you. Same thing with Visual Basic, but not so much here. And you know what? Yeah. You could say, well, that's a pain in the butt. But really, that's a lot of flexibility because it allows you to have your form sitting over here on another screen, watching it while you're testing your program, and actually playing with the values. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it is. So how are we going to say hello, Kurt? I remember back in the day we had a function. I wonder if it's still out there. Message box. Oh, looks like it's still here. Now back in VB6, it was MSGBOX.
Yeah.
But here we've got show. Okay, we're going to show a message box. Now you see how this is similar, guys, to Power Apps. We got IntelliSense. We got things that's trying to help us out. Then it's got this stuff over here. Look, we got over 20 overloaded ways that we could call this show method. I'm going to hit tab, and I'm going to put a parenthesis there. Look at this. We have 21 different overloaded. Kurt, would you mind telling us what overloaded means?
Okay, so it means that something is different within the signature of the function that's being used. Okay, so functions, the anatomy of a function. You have parameters, you have return. Okay, so if something changes, you can have the name be the same. So let's say we have a function out there called click me, or show or message box. Okay, message box dot show. It can have a whole bunch of different ones because the return can be different, or the parameters can be different in it. If you change the parameter, you can use the same. Overloading it means we're going to create a function called box or show. I'm sorry. We're going to create a function called show, and we're going to list it in this case, it's 21 times. We're going to have 21 different show functions. Each function is going to have a different parameter list in it.
Yeah. So if you worked at Microsoft and created the code behind the show, you might think, oh, that's just a function called show. No, it's 21 different functions with the same name, but different parameter types, or they call it like a method or a function signature. So they have 21 different blocks of code, and they could call each other, but when the code is compiled, it knows exactly which one of the 21 it's going to call based on how many parameters you passed in, or the value type coming back. So overloading, this is something that took me when I was learning .NET, because it's a fully object-oriented programming language. So with object-oriented, you've got this thing called inheritance. So I could create a message box object that inherited all the properties from a base class, and we called it maybe control. And then maybe control had like an on select or a this or a that, and I would create my own that I think is better or handles a specific situation that the base class doesn't do, and that's called override. The base class is overriding what the parent was trying to pass on to the child. Overload is a horizontal. You got 21 different things within that. And you do have overloaded functions in Power Apps. You may not realize that. But if you look at the if function, oh my goodness. Yeah, you got all kinds of, the lookup. If you give a lookup function 2 parameters, it's going to return an object. If you give it 3 parameters, it's going to return a specific value. So you see, we've got polymorphism. We have all this encapsulation stuff that's actually built into Power Apps, and using a component library is about as close to object-oriented programming, like creating our own objects in Power Apps. Okay, so we've got messagebox.show, and we're going to say, hello, world. I'm going to try to zoom in on my code, make it a little bit bigger there. There we go. And I'm going to get rid of this. We got more space. Okay. Now look, I've got a red squiggly. Yes, guys. So red squigglies aren't just for Power Apps or Power FX. They're all over the place with almost any language you got. So if this was Visual Basic Code, this would work just fine. But in C, C++, C#, Java, JavaScript, you end a line of code with one of these. And we also have, that is a semicolon. 2 dots are a colon. So a semicolon is same for almost all these languages. Maybe 80% of languages out there that use what would you call that, Kurt? Like a terminating escape character, or a character that terminates that line of code. How would you phrase that? Yeah,
it's a terminate character, I think would be.
Well, Kurt, you have a wealth of knowledge on all kinds of other programming languages like Pascal and probably Delphi, and do all of them use semicolons like this, or
A lot
Just
of them
like
do. A lot of them do.
do.
Pascal does. Delphi is a derivative of Pascal, so it does. And C++ does. You know, a lot of languages do. There are languages that don't. But the reason why you have that there is so that you can actually put many lines of code there, many commands on one line. You know, I just real quick history lesson. Back in the deep dark days of the of programming, we didn't have a lot of memory. So a carriage return actually was 2 lines of it's 2 characters. It's a CHR 13 plus a CHR 10. So if you did an enter, that's 2 characters. That's 2 bytes of memory. If you only have 38,000 bytes of memory, and you've got to write some big program that's taking up a lot of bytes, those 2 characters mean something. So what you do with it, we put a semicolon in there because it was only 1 line. It was only 1 character. And then, but now imagine one of my first jobs was working with DOD. They had a bomb simulation program out there, and it was a simulation that says, okay, if we drop this bomb here, it's going to do this much damage and blah blah blah, right? Well, that was written back in the 60s. So now in the 80s, late 80s, you know, bombs were a lot different. So they said, hey Kurt, can you go in here and modify this code? And I looked at this, and it was nothing but line of code, semicolon, line of code, semicolon, line of code, semicolon, and you had to sit there and try to figure that thing out. Oh my goodness, that's the way it was back then. And that semicolon was pretty important, you know.
Wow. I know in SQL or Squeal, yeah, you can use semicolons. It's not necessarily required though. So what's funny about Power Apps is you don't have to now. You only use semicolons in an imperative type of code, not declarative. So if you're just like the fill property or something, that's a declarative type of property. You're not going to have a semicolon. It will error out. You get red squiggles, right? With an imperative code like a button on select property, that's an event property, imperative. You have to have a semicolon between lines of code. But at the very end, the very last statement, you don't have to have a semicolon. Of course, I always include it. Some people just leave it off. You never know if you might need to go in there and add another line of code. I wouldn't want to be burdened to have to type another semicolon before I start writing new code. But I'm weird.
And for some reason, well, we all are. and for some reason, that seemed okay to me. That seemed it wasn't a big crossover from the C++ or C#. Because you know how you have to have open and close curly brackets if you have more than one code in a code block. But let's say but if you have an if that just does one command line, you don't have to have those curly brackets, right? So for some reason that crossed over to the Power Apps life for me easily.
I like it. Now I'm gonna field this question, you Kurt. Is this what we call local variables in Power Apps? So I guess, Jad, so you said that at 7 minutes ago. So what were we talking about 7 minutes ago? We haven't covered locals, but you do have locals. In .NET, most of these languages, locals are called private variables. In globals, you would say public in something like C#. But you've got another 3 variable, 3 probably. There are. I know that there are several different scope modifiers for a variable. You got public, you got private, you got friend. A friend, what's that? Everything inside that project, if I remember it right, that's what friend is. Like it's almost like a public, but only if the code accessing that is inside that project. Well, how else would it? Well, if you created a DLL or a component library, they won't be able to get to that friend.
That's right.
A friend is something inside the project. If we go back over to our tree view, look at this. We have a project called Power Apps Superpowers. Okay, well, that's a project. We have a solution. We could have 10 different projects here. We could have our own component library, all kinds of different stuff. So yeah, this thing can get really extensive.
So the scoping of this would be something like, Darren, do you think it would be, I'm just trying to think of a way to describe friend. A friend value, a friend scope would be like what we're dealing with a form, right? So you have a form that has a button out there, and that button would be a friend to the form, right? If you were looking at the scope of that, it's not necessarily, it could see that you could see it in that form, but you
Are you
wouldn't be able to
talking,
see it outside that.
are you talking about .NET, or are you talking about Power Apps?
I'm just talking about a concept of a friend scoping. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm just trying to paint a picture so that people can understand it.
Yeah, so check this out. So you know how we've got a form here, which is different than a Power Apps form, right? This is sort of like a screen that we're looking at here. Okay, a screen. Well, what are local variables in Power Apps? It's a variable that has a scope that's limited to just that screen. Okay, but here, a local would have the scope that is just for this form, this screen. Okay, but how do we do that? I'm going to double click on this, and oh look, my screen was called Form 1. Oh my goodness, I regret double clicking it now. It's going to be all Form 1 now. I got to go through and change it. Okay, so let's look at the top here. Let's look at all this code that we have. This is all the code that we have, generally speaking, for this. Now we have designer code, but
Right back there.
okay. So Rick left me and the Kurt left me, and I've got abandonment issues, guys. So somebody say something in chat. All right. So let's say you see all this public stuff. It's like this is able to be called. This is what's called a wow, it's been a long time since I constructor. I think that's what it's called, a constructor, which actually is called whenever that thing is created in memory. So you put all your code like initialize component. Look at that. So if we click on this and hit F12, it's going to call this code. Mark, that's in the private chat here. How do I go back? So if I hit F12 to go into a definition, is it like Control F12 will take me back where I was at? Love to hear if you know that. Because I don't know it, I'm going to click on this thing again. Go back to this code. All right. So we don't have a lot of code in our screen just yet. Okay. And yeah, so Amber, you said the method. So these functions within a class, if they're public, so this is my definition of what a method is. Okay, those are methods. If you've got a public, so in this case, it's generally called a constructor whenever it's instantiated. But I would say any function, this block of code that can be called, that is public, yeah, I would agree that is a method. If they're private, then it's just a function that can be called. Only code within this file here, within this, well, I should say class. You see the word class here. So we're defining an object. This is like the blueprint for an object. So we call that a class. So you can use the word class and object interchangeably? No, you can't. Would you call a blueprint of a house a real house? No, it's just paper. The blueprint is the definition for the house. So we call that a class. And if we build a house from this blueprint, we call that an object or a real house. And then we could build 20 houses in a huge neighborhood from a single blueprint. But one house might have a red door, the other one might have a green door. So those would be instances. Okay. So you see all this private and we have a public. Well, if we want to have a global in our application, what we'd say was to say, hey, public var. Oh, var, don't give me IntelliSense there. And I don't think you can make a global var. Var is that's come out, I wouldn't say recently, but it wasn't there at the beginning of .NET. So if I said, if I had like an integer, boom, int, and I say number of clicks. Let's set that to 0. Okay, so that is a public variable. So anything outside of this screen, any code outside this screen, or even outside the project, theoretically could access this number of clicks. And when you create objects, typically you want, like you drive a car, you want to have a dashboard in front of you, not a bunch of like vacuum tubes if you want the windshield wipers to go, right? Instead of having a temperature gauge, maybe the dashboard wouldn't be there, but you'd like reach into the engine and feel how hot it is to know the temperature. So having a nice black box, so we lower the hood and we have a dashboard so we can even see the engine while we're driving. We like the fact that it's running and it's sort of like this black box like you can't see in unless you crack it open, of course. Your object should have this feature called encapsulation. So you don't want to see everything that's going on. You only want to expose what somebody would want to use, like a dashboard or steering wheel. So this one would be global. Now, let's say if we kept the name of the person, we could say private, and we'll say string, and we'll say person's or user's name. And we'll set this up to be just empty string. Okay, so you guys see that? Here's a global, and this is a local. And the word local and private, if you're in a C# world, you'll hear those things being those two words being used interchangeably. Okay, so to answer your question, Jad, is this what we call local? That's how you create a local. So any other code in this project, in this program that we're building, will not be able to access that. If we wanted it to be accessed within the project, we would say friend. Hopefully they didn't take that out. Or maybe there's another keyword. Maybe that was actually part of Visual Basic. So I'll have to revisit that if you guys are interested in how you do a friend in C#. But if anybody knows, go ahead and type it in the chat.
I'm sorry about that. I was just trying to paint a picture of scoping of friend.
Oh no, so he Jad was asking about and maybe when you were talking about it, I got thinking on the friend thing, and I thought I was going to be able to.
But like what you were saying, so when you want to talk about a local variable, so a local variable is only going to be able to be seen within that place, that function that you created it in, whatever function that was. Like right there, you have that say hello click.
Oh yeah.
If you put a local variable there, whatever variable definition that you put there, that's where it's going to be able to be seen. In C#, it's kind of like if you define that at the form level, well, then it's going to be able to be seen within the form. So like right there, he's got my string. That's a local variable in C. In Power Apps, it's going to be an update context, and it's going to be able to be seen only on that one screen that you're at. But we don't have a local variable within like a certain function, except for in Power Apps, except for with the with block. You can do a with block, and that's sort of like that, See, you can actually have, if you're doing a for next loop and you have a variable called int x, it will only be seen within that loop, within that block of code. So you can actually you can localize this thing down to the granular level, man, of your code. That's what's so cool about scoping in this thing.
Yeah, so you have globals. In here we say public. A private is, you say private. I think where I got on the whole local is that the local equivalent in C# to coming from Power Apps would be at the top with the private. So that's actually called a private. And then Kurt, I'm so glad that you mentioned this. So then we have, well,
Local.
it's like local to what? Local to the class. Okay, that's a private. Local here to a function or procedure. Okay, you don't even use a scope modifier. You
Nope.
just say what type it is. In this
Yep.
case, I said string.
Yep.
So I'll say
Exactly
nothing.
right.
And then you mentioned with, it's within that block, and it you know, in Power Apps we have a with, so you guys know what with is. So there's a different syntax in C#, Visual Basic, and all these things.
Right.
But know that you have got a scoping with within a block of code, which means ifs, or I should just say branching in general, because we got switch and everything, right? So if you declare a variable like I did here within this block of code, whenever we hit this ending curly brace, which is the end of our function, then this thing gets deallocated. I mean, I could get technical and talk about when exactly it does with the garbage collector, but in theory, that's where the scope ends. You can only reference this particular variable within this block of code. So you can have a with block, that's a block of code. You've got a branching, you've got iteration. So these are different ways of having yet another different type scope. And we still have the friend, which I talked about. I forgot what the C# equivalent is. Are there any, Kurt, did you mention any other type of scope modifiers that, just for the sake of completeness here?
No, I think what you just code the local function, and then you've got your block, your code block, which is what you talk about with your branching and iteration. Those are your code blocks, right?
Yeah.
But now the friend scope is usually used when you're dealing with creating objects or classes. When you're dealing with classes, friends, because of the methods, right? The methods are usually friend type functions, I think, and then public globals. It's just, I think if you just create that at the higher level, well, no, you can actually create that in code. I'm just trying to think outside of objects. I never use public or private outside of objects. I don't think I ever have.
So in Visual Basic, we have these things called modules,
Modular
which
level,
would be, it's sort of like app.formulas like we have in Power Apps. It's just a place, you just put all your global code in there. It just all goes there. So Visual Basic, you can create a module. Anything you say public, boom, it's global, like really global. How you do that in C# is you have to create a class that is static, which means it can't be instantiated. So if I were to go in here and say, gee whiz, add new item. Oh, wow. And I could say globals.cs.
I don't think I've ever done that in C.
And sometimes people will actually give it a meaningful name, like, hey, these are my helper functions or something. But let's say we just want one place for all of our global stuff, all of our global functions and things. Internal. That's what it is. That's how you do a friend in C#. It's called internal.
Yep.
Okay. So here, what we would do, I think it's static. Yeah. Boom, static, which means, okay, this is a class. Okay, very good. Static class globals. Now it doesn't like this. Globals is not a word. I don't want a spell checker in my code. That's just disable the spell checker. Gee whiz.
Thank you.
I don't need any more squigglies in my code, Kurt. Yeah, so Shell says, I need to make a cheat sheet of what each thing means in each one. This is cool. I love seeing all the interest in this, guys, because I mean, Kurt and I, we got a wealth of knowledge to share in this area to give you perspective. So let's say you learn Power Apps to create apps. Well, you became a developer. Let's forget about all that citizen developer stuff. Citizen developers are people that just like to drag and drop things, and the only code they know is like submit form, right? Um, we're teaching you coding concepts in the accelerator program. We're teaching you um, the full the software development lifecycle process, the SDLC. We have a whole course within the accelerator on that. We're teaching you timeless concepts that in 20 years, when Microsoft says, we're done with Power Platform, now it's going to be, maybe they take a play from Rick's playbook, and we're going to go with a G sharp or a G flat, and that's the new Power Platform. Well, guess what? You may not want to follow Microsoft in that direction, and you want to be writing some Python code or Rust. Apparently, Rust is the most popular language on the planet, and it's very low level, like assembler, which I have a hard time understanding why people would like something that low level. But maybe for the same reason, Power Apps developers are interested in C#, as we're doing here, to have more control. So we could create our functions inside this class. So I'll do that. I'll say public. Now, if you see something here within Visual Studio, I could hit tab, but if I hit it, I think twice, so there's things called snippets here. So if I say public, and so these are tabs here. So we've got this icon is typically meant for functions, I believe, or classes. And I said public here. Where did my so if, let's say, you use your IntelliSense here, just hit Control period. It used to work. What is there another?
He goes, it used to work.
Who moved my cheese?
He goes, it used to work.
It's got no
That's the story
suggestion.
of Darren's live stream. It's like he'll be out there working on this stuff, and it's like, wait, what? It's not working.
We'll just do a friend. So, guys, that's my leftover VB knowledge that bled into this part of my brain. So there's these things called snippets. Let's see if I can. Maybe I shouldn't talk about it if I can't do it from the top of my head here. But let's do a public function. Okay. And a function needs a return type. So we could say string, but if we say void, it means there's no return type. It's not going to return a thing.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the name of our function? Return nothing. Put the cursor out of the way. There's our parentheses. There's my curly braces. And I just created this. Now, let's see what I did wrong here. I think it might need to be static as well. It doesn't like void here. Field cannot have a void type.
Why is it calling it a field?
If I said string here, would it still complain? Okay. So we're going to return a string here. And notice that a green squiggly is nicer to look at than a red squiggly. Okay. What does it say? A non-nullable field function must contain a non-null value when exiting. Okay. Well,
Right.
okay. I'll do it here. Return.
Oftentimes,
What's that?
Oftentimes back in the old days when I wanted to do a void function, but it wouldn't handle it, as I would return an int and I would have a 0 or 1. If it was a 0, it was fine. If it was a 1, there was a problem. It would let me know that there was a problem running the function, So I used to just do like return 0.
Yeah. So if you ever do a console app, you'll definitely see this. There's going to be a class called program static void main. If you've done this, applies to C, C++, Java, C#. Is that true on the C and C++? Am I remembering that right, Kurt? It's been 25 years since I wrote.
Yeah, I had a really hard time when we first started looking at this back with the Windows apps, depending, because I was used to seeing a console app not have that static in front of it. I really had a hard time with static, if you remember. And I still struggle with that because it used to be just void main. It was just void main. What's this static thing? And
Yeah.
I think I understand it now.
So something I was saying about static is that you don't have to instantiate an object. So here within my little code for my button, I could say something like program dot and supposedly call it. So if there's static things, and you notice over here for program, this thing, maybe the default is private, perhaps, because I don't see a public here. Now, if I went over here and, well, that's what I was trying to do in the other one. Yeah, I created a global thing here. Functions. Yeah. So whenever somebody wants to call this, do you see it says that first line thing here? It says globals dot return string is what it was showing me there. So you don't have to instantiation isn't something that you do within Power Apps, but in a traditional coding language, if you want to use a class or a function, you've got to say the class name. So we do have a class called form1. I could say that, and it's helped me out here. So I created a variable called form. The type is a class called form1 or a screen that's called form1. And we say new. There's a keyword called new that will instantiate something. It will create something new in memory out on the heap. And we've talked about the stack and the heap when we talk about globals and locals within Power Apps. So it's going to create this out in memory. Before we did this, it was just some code sitting in there, just a definition. So this is how you do an instantiation. So after we instantiate this class and it's an object in memory, I could say form dot, look at this. So this is the screen we have. And there's all kinds of things that we could do here. If we go back to our form1 code, no, I don't want to look at that. I want to look at the CS file. Okay, see how this is private. If I had created something like this, a public, I don't want to initialize anything. We'll do a return and say my string. And then here we say, return. It's trying to help me out too much. The string. Okay, now that we have that, I'm going to hit Control S. Control S saves a file. Control Shift S saves all the files that that need that have changed, that need to be saved. Okay, so if I go back to this code over, where was I? Yeah, I was right here. So now that I have a public function there, I can say, what I call it, my string. Yeah, okay, my string, and cut that, and here we have a internal static class, and I could just call this thing that I instantiated. Now, Kurt, it returns a void. The keyword must not be followed by an object expression. Okay, well, that makes sense. My string. But you saw I could like call it off of a variable that I instantiated. Returns a void. Now I don't have void here anymore. So this is what happens when I'm a little rusty on a live stream. I could figure it out, but and I'll watch for the comments. So there might be
You
some.
have two. To me, you have two function names going on over there. You have a string called function, and then a return string name, right? So it seems like if you took one of those,
Oh, I know. If I took that out, function. Now what's it gonna must have a return type. So I gave it a return type here, and maybe it has to be after the function.
no.
Nope.
So do you have? I don't think you have to have that word function there, do you? I think you just say static.
You're right.
That's what I was trying to say. You get it's like you
You're
got two
right.
names. I thought you were creating a function called function. There you go. Now you're flying.
Guys,
that's what I was trying to tell you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we'd have to have that in there in Visual Basic.
Right. Right.
We either have to have the word function or
Yeah.
sub, and a
And see,
function has to have a return type. A sub would have no return type.
and
And
see
how you do
everything's a
that in C
function.
sharp? What's that?
And see everything is a function, right? They don't have procedures or anything else. Everything is a function in C.
Yeah,
There you have it.
very cool. Okay, so we figured it out. We put our minds together and we figured it out. And Amber says, this added value to my knowledge. Very cool. Glad to hear that. And then Jed gives us a thumbs up. Okay, so we were just trying to do a hello world, Kurt.
Yeah.
That's the thing about us here. We can't just do something simple. We have got to give you tons of context. And I think that's perhaps why people tune into to our I'm sure we're not exclusive, right? So if you like classic rock, you're not just going to listen to Pink Floyd, right? You're going to listen to all kinds of different bands. But okay, so we're trying to say hello world. Okay, so we've got a string here, and we initialized it to Doo Stinks, which actually got me in trouble with a client when I worked with you. So we have a message box show.
Now you can't just so let's take this message box to another level if we could.
Yeah.
Let's do another parameter after that my string.
Look at this, Kurt. We could call this, and we didn't have to instantiate globals. And so, Kurt, don't forget what you're about to say. I apologize. So that's where I was going there, which if you want to splice something together, you use a plus sign in C sharp, where you could do that in Power Apps, but you have the ampersand, which is normally what's used. Okay, so you said let's make this a little more interesting.
Well, when I use a message box, I like to use a caption, and I like to use there's a message box has a set of buttons too. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and do right after that my string. Let's put a comma there, or wherever you're finished with your first parameter.
Yeah. So I like where you're going, Kurt, and I'm going to do that next. But I want to show you. We've got my string, and I'm going to say dash like this. I just want to show people what's like what this code looks like right now. Like what's the output.
And actually, what we should do too is we should have a label assigned. Let's do the same thing. Let's assign a label right there of that value.
That's what I was going to do after I did the message box.
Okay, well so let's go back to the label now. Or do you want to go ahead and finish the message box out first?
Yeah. So here's the message box. Hello, Doo Stinks. This is my string. Jen says, why do it simple, hello world, when you can do it Darren and Kurt style?
Exactly, Jan. Exactly. We talked about that last week, didn't we, Jan? That's funny.
Okay, Kurt. So do you want to go down that passage of like doing icons and all kinds of stuff? Okay, so
let's do it.
All right. So I've got a comma here.
And then let's put like Darren's cool message box caption right there.
Okay. Darren's cool message box.
And then let's do another comment after that.
Okay. If we have like several parameters, I almost want to not split it up so much so it's obvious. So
Okay.
what is that, right? So if I do this, now if you guys want to see exactly which one of these 21 functions you're calling, just do a comma and then take the comma out. So we're calling number 3 and it's expecting string, text, and then the caption. All right. Now what do you want to do, Kurt?
So just do a comma there.
Okay.
Just type O for OK. Yeah, look at that. Look at that. So
Look at
now you
that.
go in and you say, now you could do OK cancel, but we just want an OK button here because we're just doing OK. Right?
We just want to be okay, Kurt.
We just want to be OK. Now this is where then we do another comma, and I think you should have icons, shouldn't you?
Yeah. So you guys see this? There's an enumeration, and this is something they have in Power Apps. You know, like if you want to, you used to be able to say white, and it would be white, right? But then you had to say colors dot white, and colors is what's called an enumeration. It's a way of grouping a bunch of constants together, right? So we have a grouping of constants called an enumeration called message box icons. And these are all the buttons that you could have. You can have a yes, no, cancel, cancel, try, continue. Look at all this stuff, guys.
If you're making a dialog box, this message box is designed to be a dialog, and it actually should return. It will have a return value if you use, like, say, a yes, no. If you use like a yes, no icon, it'll have a 1 for yes, a 2 for no. And you can see how he's got that set up right there. Yes, no, cancel. So if your dialog box, this is a powerful tool. I used to use this all the time, man, because you can use it for debugging. You can just show your variable and just have an OK button there, or you can actually ask the user to go, hey, do you want to do a yes or do you want to do a no? Do you want to go here or not? Are you sure you want to save? Are you really, really sure you want to save? And then you can ask, are you really, 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 really sure you want to save? So you can do all sorts of cool stuff with this, man.
Absolutely.
Now, you should be able to do an icon here too. Oh, look at that. You got message box icon question.
Okay, message
Look
box.
at that.
Look at
all
this.
those icons.
So I've got a suggestion. Now I think this is I pay for GitHub Copilot. So this is actually using AI to anticipate what the next line of code I want to write is, or the next parameter.
Yeah, it's kind of like an IntelliSense after you do the, it's kind of cool. So,
but look at all these. Question, warning. So these are the different icons we could have. Question, warning, information, exclamation, error, hand.
I like the exclamation mark when I'm doing these because I'm excited. I want people to be excited about that button,
Do you happen to know what the difference between these ones that have a star beside it and the ones that don't have stars?
I don't know what that is.
It's like if you had to guess, you'd probably say, well, maybe these are the most popular ones. And I believe that's what it is.
Probably
so. I'll say exclamation, which I did, but then something moved on me there. But there it is.
There you go.
And I'm going to run it. And oh, look at that. We have an icon.
Is that not cool or what? Huh?
It is cool.
That's a lot of power right there with one line of code, isn't it?
Yeah.
Out of all, and that's been around for a while. And I just think it's the maybe one of the greatest things that Microsoft ever did.
And the only equivalent thing that we have in Power Apps is Notify. Which it's very watered down. You've got 3 choices. You could say success, which is going to be green. Red is going to be air, and then information will be in gray. And you could specify how long it's going to stay there. And
it's extremely.
What if you needed to find out if they wanted to proceed or cancel? Well, you got to do your own pop-up. You got to. So in this case, I mean, C# is much easier to do things in this case than Power Apps. How about that?
And they put it up at the top of the thing. It's just a terrible. It's a Notify is a terrible function for Power Apps. Hey, Microsoft, I hope you're listening to this because look, man, you can do better. We expect bigger things from you.
You should write your. We call it Kurt Notify, and it will have all these features.
I saw one day. I saw That might be when we're doing this JAML stuff and YAML stuff and we're breaking this stuff down. That might be the very first thing I do is create my own doggone message box. Because it was done. You think about it; it's been around for a long time. It was done back with the VB3, and Visual Basics had it. Visual Basic had it. All the Visual C had it. But you're not going to put it in Power Apps. Put it in Power Apps, folks. I mean, this is your stuff. I think it's one of the best things that Microsoft ever did. It's a great debugging tool. Oh my goodness. Is this
you guys, I almost don't want to sell this too much because you guys will want to just be C# programmers rather than Power Apps developers. But check this out. You know how we got a bunch of lines of code? Well, we got to put a label on the screen and throw something into it. I am going to, for some reason I'm getting hot, and I just realized I didn't have my fan on. So
I'm hoping that Power Apps is going to go there. They're going to actually go to these directions eventually, I hope.
Yeah. So look, how you debug, and there's no really easy way to what Kurt and I would call, like, I want to step through my code.
Yeah.
So what I did here was I put a breakpoint. I just clicked on this little margin off here to the side. Okay. And there's a little red dot. That means whenever this code runs here within Visual Studio, it's going to stop there. Why would we want it to stop? Well, to troubleshoot something. Here's the code, and it's about to execute. I can hover over my string. Oh, it says doo-doo stinks. Now, what if we always want to see that? Where did it go? It went down here into the watch. We got autos, you got locals. I was expecting it to float here. Am I just not seeing it?
I don't.
Okay, so I'm going to try it again. I'm going to hover over my string. It is pinned. Also, you can go in here and change it. And I can say,
you can actually change the value there.
I think so.
Oh, that's kind of smooth. I didn't know that. Dang, Darren,
Yeah.
you showed me something I didn't know, man. That's cool.
And you see down here, look, I can be viewing that variable at all times down here. I was just used to seeing them sort of float, and maybe you can still do that, but they changed how it.
That is so powerful right there.
It is, isn't it?
Be able to input values as you're testing, so you don't have to go back through a whole loop and go catch that value, and you got to go back to the beginning and go through the process. No, just I want to see that point with this different value in it.
Yeah.
Love it. Man.
So if you want to know something, what this thing's going to return, I can select it, right click on it, and say add watch. What is it going to return? Whatever is returned by that. System.window forms message. So talk about enumerations. So this is an enumeration message box icon. What is all this system.windows.forms? That is what's called in Java and C# and many languages today as a namespace.
Yeah.
You look at the top of any code here, you should have a namespace provided. So my project has a namespace. So let's say if you've got a DLL or some program that instantiated my program, and I have a global variable called doo-doo stinks, and some other component they're using also has doo-doo stinks. There's no ambiguity because you can just reference the namespace dot the variable. So
yeah, for some of you guys that have been watching, especially if you're in the PPC and you've been seeing some of the AI functions that I've been making videos for, we talk about that, how we have to use the environment data source right now, and that's kind of working as a namespace for Power Apps, and how eventually we're not going to have to do that. Even say we're not going to have to do that within that. Use the environment, so that tells you that there's a namespace that's being used right now for that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's say, is there any way else? So these are your debugging and troubleshooting tools. You can watch variables and values and, everything stinks now. Um, you can see the argument. So you see there, this is a click event, and there's a bunch of context information that's passed in called event args. And Microsoft just generates this code with the letter E. Well, go down to E. What can I find out? What can I use? And oh, look at this, guys. Don't you wish you had this in Power Apps? E. I can see all kinds of stuff. The clicks, the delta, the location, the X and the Y.
So one thing that I'm concerned about is that I don't want people to feel overwhelmed by looking at this. Like we're just kind of exploring this thing right now, and we're seeing lots of different stuff. Just think about though, you do this in Power Apps already. You've got your property window. You're doing it. We just have more of it. There's literally nothing that we're doing here that you don't already know at some form. You may not realize it, but within Power Apps, you're doing it. But here we just have it at a deeper level. You have more control. So when you see this big old list of properties, you're like, oh my goodness, that is too much. It's really not, it just gives you more granular control over everything. Same thing with the events. Don't you just guys wish you had more than just an on select, for your events? Now you've got 30 or 40 different events. You can get down to the key press. When the key is going down, I want to be able to control what happens. I want to write some code for whenever somebody pushes the M key down. And then when that M key comes up, I want to be able to do some other code. That's the level of granularity that we have here. So it's just, you're doing the same thing. And I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. It's really simple stuff. You guys have been doing it already. There's nothing more complex than a patch statement, I'm telling you, or a patch function. That's the most complicated thing you're going to do in Power Apps. But this is no different. It's just coding is just coding, man. It's the same thing. You guys can do it. If you're seeing this for the first time and you're going, oh, what the hell? It's okay. I just don't want you to feel overwhelmed in it, because we're going to break this stuff down even deeper and get simple. Right now, today, we're just kind of playing around. We're viewing this visual. We've turned into this editor, and we talked about maybe having a workshop on this editor, and I would love that idea. Maybe we will, and then we can really just go simple. Let's just break it down to the simple points and have some structure behind it. Sometimes I know, like when Darren's going, he gets to going and he's picking fast and everything else, but we're kind of exploring right now. So
Yeah.
Just don't get overwhelmed is what I'm trying to say.
And why this is so important, guys, that we're laying this foundation for this. So I run 4 different school communities. So one is a free one. It's got over 1,000 people in there, and I would invite every single person that's watching this, hey, join the community. I actually have staff that will answer your questions. Sometimes I answer them. Sometimes Kurt answers them. But we've hired staff to help us out, because there's only so much Kurt and Darren to go around, and we should be creating more video content and doing other things. But we have the accelerator. So this is out there. You probably heard us talk about it quite a bit. Well, we have a separate community. Let's look at all the courses that is available here. I mean, this thing has got all kinds of content, all kinds of modules. Here we go in the SDLC. Kurt has some amazing practical labs and exercises. All of our group calls, we have 3 of them throughout the week. They're all recorded and uploaded here if you miss them. So there's a lot going on here. But I've got this community called Power Apps Template. Right now, it started off as $1 a month. If you got in at the $1 a month, you will only pay $1 a month for infinity into the future. But it's only going to go up. Right now, it's set at, I think, $5, if I'm not mistaken. So you can get in, and so it's only going to go up from there as we start building out this template. We'll start building apps with it, and guys, you can take these apps and turn around and sell them to people. So you can see the value as time goes on, why the price would go up. Because let's say the most that I can charge per month in a school community is $1,000. Now, if it gets to that point and there's like 25, 50, 75 different apps, and like, oh, I've got a client over here, a real estate agent, and he wants an app. Oh, let's go to the school community, Power Apps Templates. Oh, look, there's a real estate app here. I could sell that app and maybe customize a little bit for a real estate agent, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. So you could see how the $1,000 would definitely be worth it if it ever gets that high. But yeah, as we have more and more stuff, the price will go up. But if you get locked in today, the most you'll ever pay is $5 a month. So that's
That's
why,
pretty good considering you can charge $15,000 for a template. You
or
know,
more. I
that
mean,
you'll have to tweak a little bit.
that would just be one of them. I mean,
Yeah.
the same client might like, well, I need something to track all my employees' hours, and I need something to track our invoices, and we need to, I mean, onboarding, all kinds of stuff. I'm sure we're going to have an app for all of these things. So if you think that sounds great, but I would highly recommend that you sign in now. Um, and then we have a separate community for our workshops. So I should probably put links to all these things. I'm going to put this in the chat. These are for workshops. Currently, we do our workshops on Friday afternoon. And this next one coming up could be on these topics that we're talking about today. If I hear from enough of you, I'd say at least 5 or 10 people saying, heck yeah, I want to sign up for a workshop that does that. They would see the value in it. Let's see, can't post messages some channels. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, and to that note, and if you want to see a workshop on something else that's more important to you, let us know that too.
Yes, please. Thank you. And then I'll also include, so here's links to all 4 of these communities. And by the way, if you click on the accelerator, you could sign up in a minute, but if you want a discount, then book a call with us, with me and Kurt, and we'll talk to you about the different packages, or really what we want to do is we want to learn more about you and which level or which package would best suit where you're at and where you're trying to go and all that stuff. So there's that, and that's why all this stuff is really important, because if you look at our templates and environment here, we already have 138 people here. I think over 100 of them got in at the $1 a month. So the link to today's live stream, Amber just said he couldn't find it. If you go to, actually I posted in all 4 of these communities. It's right here, live stream today, C# equals Power App Superstar. And then Amber, I know you're in the accelerator. So if you go down to, I thought I did it. What live stream today?
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, it's there. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I just thought I wanted to double check it. But yeah, if you're going to accelerator, you can actually be a panelist on it. You go in the Restream.
Yeah.
If you want to.
Absolutely. All right. Oh, I keep forgetting why I even brought this up. If you go to the templates, this is why we're going into it. Is because Kurt and I, we are going to create a code generator. So imagine bringing up a program that Kurt and I build, and you'd have a say-so in what features you'd want in here. Okay, you bring up a screen like this, and you've got a new Power Apps project to do. Can you imagine having a text box like, okay, my project's going to be called this. It's going to be my time tracker app. Okay, then we could pull in through an API to ChatGPT-4 and give it a prompt along with what you said about the application you want to build, and it's going to come back with useful questions like, oh, you need to keep track of invoices. So you probably need an invoice number, a date, a customer name, and all this stuff. Are there any other things that you want to have built in your app? And you'll input all this stuff, and it will come back and ask questions like, hey, that date time, is it just a date, or do you want to also have a time picker control in Power Apps as well? Or a bunch of drop downs added to, and it could generate the whole Power Apps application, give you the MS app file, and just upload it, and like 90% of your app is just generated for you from this app we build in C#. You don't seem excited, Kurt.
Oh, I am. I absolutely am. I'm just listening to you talk.
maybe it's an indication. Yeah, I'm getting a little too wordy here. So let's go back into the code. I think it's actually running. No, it's not. So let's go back to the code here. We're getting all excited, and so this is what's interesting here, guys. So you know how the patch function in Power Apps returns a value? Well, this show, as Amber was talking about a method, this is a show method. It's a function that's hanging off of an object that we can call. So this is a method. And a lot of methods and functions do return a value. In this case, it returns an object. Okay. Because you see that I've got a dot. So if I hit dot.
Now this is what I like about C# versus C++.
Yeah.
Because everything, the data types are objects. So there is no such thing as a simple data type anymore, like an int. Because the int is actually, if you type int out there and you put dot, you can actually see, look at that. Look at all that stuff that you've got out there. You can actually, those are methods and properties that are of the int thing. So you got all sorts, so you can say toString now of x. Int x dot toString.
An integer is an object. It's a simple type, but it's actually a complex type.
Yeah, everything in C# is an object. Everything, even the simple data types are objects. It's kind of cool. Now, again, that's the reason why I say we ask more and more of our computers, because you're taking up a lot of resources by doing that, right? Gone are the days that we're going to have a two byte variable out there. You know, that int variable's probably got, I don't know, a meg of bytes. I don't know what it's got. It's probably maybe a K out there, right? So it's just kind of interesting.
Well, so saying int is a shortcut to system.int32.
Yeah.
So check this out. You were talking about how much space it's going to use, right?
Yeah.
Look, we have int 128.
Well, that's good. Okay, so that's going to be I think that's for the processor, right? So now do a size of. Now, can you do a size of that? It seems like you can. Maybe you used to.
After it's instantiated,
Yeah.
I'll do the 128, and but
this is
it
what
moves.
we do.
It moves. Of course, I'm like really zoomed in here, but
we
want to
go
make sure
down
everybody
these
can
rabbit
see.
holes.
So we got what?
We go down these rabbit holes. It's so funny.
We do. So if I said y dot, what did you say? Size up.
Size of. Do you have a size of?
I've
There used to
never
be a
used
size of
that.
function.
There is a size of.
Yeah, size of, and then do left parenthesis x. Maybe put that in a message box or something.
That's right. Okay, we do a size of. Do we have? Oh, look, even that's going to return, and we can say toString. Okay, so if you want anything, let's say it's an integer, and you need to make it a string. Everything's got a toString. It's sort of like in the very base class that everything inherits from. So if I cut that, I can actually put it into all this. Do a plus, and we'll do one of these things there, and then we say plus, and we'll do the size of x. Now x does not have a predefined size because I said int. But what if we said y? So that is a shortcut to the, I believe, the int 32. And it might depend upon what processor we're trying to compile this for. What's that?
Hover over that int 128 again. Okay, look at you just did it. Okay.
Okay. What do you want me to do?
Well, it brought up your IntelliSense, and there it is. So it represents a 32-bit signed integer. So it's a 32-bit size. So when we look at what y,
Mhm.
In this
You wanna-
case, I
do
guess
you want me to like select it like this?
look at that. It's a 128. Okay.
And it's telling us it is not null here. Okay. Is a variable, it's is a variable, but is used like a type.
Yeah.
It does not have a predefined size, therefore size of can only be used in an unsafe context.
Okay.
Maybe we'll leave that for a
Yeah.
separate
I used
workshop.
to do size of whenever I was going to have to malloc memory, and so you wanted to know how much memory you needed to allocate. So
And for probably the mass majority of viewers, they may not know malloc. So that's a way to create like a memory out on the heap. Is that right?
yeah, dynamically allocating memory based on the needs in the moment.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so so you see that integer can be different.
Yeah.
There's
Isn't that
different ways
crazy?
of creating an integer. I mean, what's good about this is you can get as complex as you want.
You're
You
right.
can complicate a ham sandwich to the nth degree here, right?
You're right. That's so cool though, because look, we're not baby programmers forever, folks. You know, we're just baby programmers today, but tomorrow, man, we're going to be stronger programmers. So this is this is going to keep up with us, right? We're not keeping up with it. It's going to keep up with us because we're going to get stronger all the time.
So all this to do hello world, right? So that's where I'm trying to go, Kurt. I'm trying to do a hello. I'm trying to hello world here.
Talk about complicating a ham sandwich here. Huh?
Yeah. All right, help me out here, man. All right, so we've got this string, and we pass it into this function. This show function returns an object, okay, and if I'm trying to find out, I'm saying, hey, this returns a type, and the return type is dialog result. So there's an object, there's a class called dialog result, and it's going to return an object of that type, dialog result. Okay, and if it returns it, what do we have access to? Well, we can say just toString, and it's going to tell us what happened. Okay. Yeah, compared to equals, which is common for any type. Okay. So what I'm going to say is toString, and the toString is a function, so we need some parentheses there. Okay. So whatever was returned by this show function, I'm going to put it into the variable that we were using before. So you see this, we talk about like evaluation and assignment of variables. So here, okay, we created the variable and we initialized it to this value. So we did an assignment when we declared it. And then down here, we're doing an evaluation, which means we're going to find out what the value is. And we're going to pass it into this show function. But look here, when you have on the left side of an equal sign, like this, you're assigning a new value to it. Okay, so whatever we answer, which is yes, no, cancel, those are going to be our options. I'm hoping that it will signify that. Now I'm going to take this new the new value in the my string, and I want to do something with it. Let's populate that little modest label here. So did we give it a meaningful name? Did we say LBL? We did. Oh, look at that. It's helping me out here. This is something you cannot do
Dang.
in Power Apps. And guys, I probably wasted days, if not weeks, when I'm like, what? I just want to say button one or label one dot text equals a variable. And I don't even think I was getting any red squigglies. That's what was driving me nuts.
Right.
Like, this is like the simplest thing I should be able to do. I hate Power Apps, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, I was like under this dilemma. Am I even going to mess with this thing out here called Power Apps? This is a joke. That's what I thought.
I did too. At first.
I'm going to go with this. This is exactly what I want to do. The text property, the label, I want it to be whatever's in here.
Hold on, Darren. That thing just
Oh.
brought up LBL display hello for you. You did.
What happened?
It actually brought up LBL display hello for you. Like it suggested what you wanted to call it, right?
Well, I called it LBL display hello.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was blown away there for a second.
Because I was looking for label 1. That's what, and I'm like, oh, there is no label 1. So maybe I did name it. Boom.
Okay, there you
Boom.
go.
Tab. Okay. So let's see what happens here within our little modest program that we've begun writing here. Where is it at? Maybe it's still compiling.
Maybe you need another screen.
Oh, we got errors, Kurt.
Oh my
Would you like to continue to run the last build? You always pretty much want to say no to this because you want to find out what the error is. Y does not have a predefined. So, yeah, we need to take this out.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to bring up the error list and see if there. So again, we have this in PowerApps. We have errors and we have warnings.
Yeah.
You can ignore warnings. Okay, look at this. This is actually useful. So Kurt, we declared a variable and we never used it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, it's probably a bad thing. These days, who cares? But because you got memory out there, But if it was in my class, I would. If we were taking my class, oh boy, it would be just like crazy.
That would get you a letter drop grade on that. Your labs were tests.
Maybe for the whole semester.
Let's say that my program was perfect and everything, and then you brought up my code and there's warnings about this and that, and you're like,
it's over.
It's what's going to be an A+? Now it's a B-.
Yep, you're right. You're right. No,
if you're good and he liked you, he'd call you a baby programmer at that point.
Yep.
Okay, now I'm going to run it. And I guess it's actually not a bad thing if you have an unused variable, if you're actually going to use it eventually.
Later. That's why I was saying, right now it's okay because you're still developing.
Yeah.
But don't turn it into a class. Don't you dare turn it in that way. It's over.
Right. Hello, doo-doo stinks. This is my string. Okay, whatever. Look at what the label did. Wow. It says yes.
So
if I click on this and say no,
look at that.
Look at that.
Just, when I ever see something like that, I always say, just look at it.
Look at it.
Look at it. So
so funny.
In the old days, it used to be a 4. Like they would return 4 for no, and it would return 3 for yes. Now it's literally returning, oh my God, just look at it.
Yeah. So what we could have done, this is interesting. I could create, now remember when I said show, well, what exactly is this returning? It's returning a dialog result. So I could create a variable of type dialog result.
Yeah.
And I would say, what's a good naming convention if we're going to create an object type of variable? OBJ? What'd you say? You must have tapped your
I did. I tapped it.
Maybe get you your mic, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Object is fine. DLG would be good too. Dialog result.
DLG. Okay. And I could just that's how you can just, oh, you're gone. Okay. Yeah, we could create variables. Like if we want an integer, boom, there's int z, boom, there's a variable. You don't have to initialize it like you do here. Okay. So we created this dot. Now it's going to give me green squigglies. Tell me, hey, you didn't use this, so you should probably get rid of it. Well, what I want to do is I don't want to do a toString. I want to put that into this dialog result. Okay, and then down here, instead of my string, I say obj DLG. And we have what we had up before. And it's just going to be a string. Now, in this case, obviously, it's not important that I created this variable, used it here, because we could have just, what we could have done instead of all this, talking about simplifying our code. This is what we could have done. Cut that and put it right here. And we wouldn't have to use a variable at all, but we would need to say toString. Okay. So look at the power of this. Like, do we really need all these variables? No, we don't need it. Now, what's the use of me showing that? Because there sometimes are return types of type object, and there are all kinds of properties that you need to get at. And it might be a good idea to do that. So you like my code, Kurt? I simplified it so I didn't have to use a variable. I'm just going to cut to the chase. Hey, the text property of this label should be whatever's returned by that message box.
I like it.
You like it? Very good. So, guys, I'd like to hear from you in the comments. What would you like to see next in this? Well, we could go back to our outline, and we'll see if we want to go down any more different paths here. I feel like we've achieved something with that hello world. What do you think, Kurt?
I think so.
Yeah.
That's not a hello world program right there, bud. I just want to put that out there.
A little more advanced.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll look at our notes here. Okay. So what have we talked about? So yeah, we talked about basic syntax. You can see in C#, we got curly braces. Now in Power Apps, curly braces are used to denote a record, not a code block.
Yeah.
So we've been going over keywords and operators, variables, assignment, evaluation. Let's do a loop, Kurt. How do we do a loop?
Okay.
What could we loop through?
Well, we could just simply do a counting loop.
Yeah.
We could also count how many letters are in a string. Do a loop.
What about torturing our users until they click OK? Like they say, no, I don't want that to happen. Cancel. Or they say retry or whatever. And we won't allow them to do anything except click on the message box over and over again until they click OK. What do you think of that?
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So in that case, I almost want to use that dialog result. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control Z, Control Z. Yeah. And I'm just going to say toString. Okay. And
now you know what? Just while you're doing that, back to that dialog result. I just wanted to show people that you could do this too.
okay.
With your message box, you could have said, you see where you defined dialog result over there?
Up here.
You could actually, you could actually do that right there where the equals on the left side of that equal sign right there. So that way you could literally use that just in that one place. So you can actually instantiate and assign a variable at the same time. Is that not some cool stuff?
That is cool.
You talk about some shortcut. Yeah.
Now, what I don't like about that, Kurt, and I think maybe you taught me this, is you want to declare at the, you got one entry point and one exit point for a block of code or a procedure or a function, right?
Yeah.
At the top is where all of your variables should be defined if they weren't defined globally or something, and or initialized at the top. So all your declarations and initializations, sometimes I split them up. So if, let's say, we're 20 lines of code down and then I do this, for me it looks cleaner code. So
well, it's a good programming practice to do it this way if you're within a code block. Like so let's say if you're just within, like, if you're in a for next loop, or you're, that's a good spot to do that. Like this type of thing.
That's true.
See what I'm
If
saying?
you want the scope of this little variable, it's only used within this with block or this loop.
Yep.
Yeah, you want to probably define it there.
And it's slick because it's creating and assigning at the same time. So it's going to be fast, concise, and clean.
Yeah, guys, you want to know what the biggest flex of a developer or a computer programmer is? When they say, "Oh, I like your code there, your 12 lines of code." I do it all in one code in my app. That's like a huge flex. It's like pretty much showing them like, boom, do you even lift, bro?
I'll just sit there and hold it and just say I could do this all day, guys. Whatever.
Let me take your spaghetti code and just do it in one line. It looks like I'm frozen again. How did I fix that before? I think I unplugged it. And I hope I don't have to continue to do this. Buy a different camera or something.
Yeah, I've noticed that the cheaper versions of things are easier because you don't have to do so much stuff. You got more stuff that you got to do with the more expensive stuff, right?
Sort of like C# over Power Apps, right?
Exactly. You got more granularity, but boy, it requires more work now.
Okay, so we got red squigglies because we already defined the variable up here. So if we want to define it and assign it down here, we can't be defining it up here. That would be a clash, right? So you guys know what's weird about Power Apps? There is no explicit way of defining a variable. How do you define a variable in Power Apps? You say set. Well, set is how you do an assignment. You put a value into a variable.
Yeah.
But if it's not there, the set is intelligent to know, hey, if it's not there, we need to create the variable, you know?
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. So when I was learning Visual Basic, you could do the same thing. You could just use a variable and it just becomes a variable.
Yeah.
And I remember there was this option in Visual Basic that said, require all variables to be defined. And there's this code at the line at the very top of the code, and it'll say option explicit.
Yeah.
If you're going to use a variable, you have to define it. I'm like, why would I ever want to be make this thing require me to do anything? You know what I mean? Well, if you can consider you've got a variable called obj DLJ, and you use it all over the place throughout your application. And let's say they're like, but one day you misspell it. Now you've got two variables.
Yeah.
And now, a few weeks down the line, when you're trying to publish this thing and users are like, hey, this doesn't work. And you're like, what? And you've got this bug and you're like sitting there looking at it for days, trying to figure out. And then finally it dawns on you when you're staring like, hey, that's oh.
Right.
So think about this. In Power Apps, you could say set, and you could have a variable GBL username. And then on another screen, you're like, yeah, I'm just going to do a set OBJ name of user. Or you misspell user or something. You might think that you're dealing with the same variable, but you're not, because it's loosey-goosey. It's, it's implicitly applied. That's why things are more structured. There's more things in place that if there's going to be the worst type of error you can have while coding, guys, is what? It's not a syntax error. It's not a red squiggly. It's the ones that aren't red squigglies that are
Logic
bugs.
error.
Yeah, because you don't know why isn't this functioning the right way? And you might be pulling out your hair and
another reason why I like to use that option explicit is because, especially in Visual Basic, and I wish Power Apps would have the same thing, is because of the data typing. It requires you to put a real data type behind it too, because everything's a variant data type. And that variant data type is just, in the Power Apps, it's the same way. Everything's variant, and you can really get into some trouble there.
So this just came up, I believe, on Thursday. We had an accelerator student, and she had a red squiggle, and it says, nope, that isn't the right. She was trying to do a set, and it wouldn't go in there. It's like, nope, it's not the right type. And she's like, why is that? I'm like, I bet you somewhere in your program. See, this is the problem with Power Apps, is you could have a screen at the very bottom of your application, And for some reason, it says, oh, you put a string in that variable. Once you put a type, it is typecast. So if you put a string in it, it's like, okay, can only ever have a string in there. And then somewhere else, you're trying to put a record, and it's like, nope, you can't do that. And it might be at the top of your program, and you're thinking, oh, well, it creates the variables like whatever type I put in it first. Well, what's your definition of first? A computer's definition of first might be it traversed all the coding files and it's doing all this stuff in there. And that was the problem. I'm like, there's some code somewhere else in your program. We've put something else in there. And so she did a search. She's like, oh, you're right. And it's like,
what makes me so angry about that, Darren, is that if it's smart enough to know that it was used somewhere else, could you at least tell me where it was?
Yeah.
You got to make me go look for it now? Really?
Yeah. In today's age of AI, why not? Why can't it tell me, hey, over on your home screen, you have a button there that puts something else in it, and you either need to, that's the conflict. That's where the conflict is. How much easier with it? I mean, we got Copilot, we got AI and Power Apps. Why can't we have that type of Copilot?
I mean, it obviously saw it to see that there was a problem. So why can't you just tell me where it was since you went to the trouble of flagging me? You already know. It's just like we're smart enough to know when we're writing programs. Oftentimes I say my program needs to be smart enough to know if I'm adding or editing a record. It's the same type of principle right there, right? You should just know. Don't get me started there.
Have we written a loop yet?
No, but at this rate, we're going to make breakfast before we can get a loop done.
All right. Well, okay, so bear with me. Let's see if we can do this here. While tap. Oh, finally, it helps me out. Okay, there we go. I'm used to these code snippets. Like when I start to type something. Okay, so this is how you do a loop within C#. While, oh, look at that. It already knows.
How did it know that you wanted to do that?
Because I purchased Copilot from GitHub and it integrates with Visual Studio. But that's not really helping me out. This thing right here. So this would cause a see, we reference it up here. We actually need the variable to be outside.
Wait a minute.
And then we take this. Nope.
I see.
Messed up there. I cut that, put it inside the loop, but we take the type out because that would try to define it. Okay. So if we try to work with this object, it has to be instantiated. So here we just created a variable of type. So, and the type is a class. So it goes to show you a blueprint is not a house. A class is not an object. An object is something that's running out of memory. We never instantiated. We never created the house. We never created this thing. And you create it with the keyword new. Now, why is it not helping me out with, I need an equal sign.
I thought it would be it would be new left parentheses. Okay.
Yeah, we do need parentheses. Because guess what that's doing? It's calling the constructor method of that class, that object.
There it is.
So look, we have a constructor up here for our screen, our form. It's called. You notice that's the exact same name as the class. So here's the class's name. So any method with that same name is the initializer. And things could be overloaded too.
And what would be the deconstructor?
So in .NET, okay, so check this out. What you do is you take this variable, you say new to create it, and at the bottom of our code here, we say this equals, in Visual Basic it would be nothing.
Nothing.
Here, I think we say null.
Right. Now, I was talking about, you were talking about the constructor of the same name. of the object, it's going to create that. Now, a deconstructor was the tilde. You put a tilde in front of it, right? And then that's
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's the same name with a tilde in front of it, and that would be the deconstructor
That's interesting.
of
Okay.
the object. You would call the deconstruction function if you needed to do some cleanup in there,
Okay. Now let me go to the property window for this form here, and we have these things. Yeah, I'm a little rusty with
Oh, me
this,
too.
but
Me too.
so
And
here's
they're
all the
looking at
event. Here's all the events that we have for this screen, for this form here. We have load. We have, I thought we would have unload as well. I'm trying to find that. So if I'm, okay, so here's the load event when the thing loads up. Now, if I say form 1, I'm trying to get it to just generate it for me. Yeah, so it brought up the constructor there. We're trying to write a loop, Kurt.
Well, let's just write the loop then, because we're getting run out of time.
There's something I'm missing here, but yeah, if you want to clean up your variables and let it release the memory, you would do something like this for some reason. Now, if I select this line of code, let's see if it helps me out.
I thought it equaled nothing. I thought that was it.
I think there's a special operator like is, but that's how you do evaluation, not assignment.
So it didn't work when you typed in nothing equals nothing.
Nothing is for Visual Basic. Null is for C#. I'm fairly sure, but that's how you do it. Now, what I will add, since this topic came up, it really doesn't deallocate the memory. It just cuts the reference from that variable name to what was created out on the heap. Because what we had with COM, with ActiveX and everything before .NET, is you would have these. Let's say we had 5 variables and they all pointed to the same object. So I said, say we have X, so we have a variable called A, B, C, D, E. Okay, those 5 variables, and we instantiated with A, but then we were passing it around, and these other variables were pointing to the same thing. So you'd have memory leaks sometimes with programs, right?
Yeah.
So what you do is you set A equals nothing in Visual Basic.
And that would cut everything else off.
But you still had these other 4 variables. And you had to make sure. So you'd have to have like a reference count on this object, like how many things. And then it's like if this thing was the count of the instance of the variable names that were pointing to this one instance. So it's just like leave it out there. You have a memory leak and everything. So with .NET, they actually adopted it from Java called a garbage collector. It just cuts the line between that variable and the object. And the object is just sitting out there, and the garbage collector is supposed to be this intelligent thing that just sits out there, terminal stay resident, as you'd say, right? And just sitting out there watching over things. And whenever the system or the program needs more memory, it's like, hey, what can I clean up? I need some more memory. What can I clean up here?
Yeah.
It's then that will actually deallocate that memory.
Yeah, GW Basic used to have a garbage collection too. In that, all your non-compiled languages would have that. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to do whenever you allocate dynamic memory, you're supposed to do a free. Wherever you're doing that, you're supposed to do a free. You do a malloc and then you do a free. But you're right. That cutting that off, it would just be you got all these. That's how come you have to reboot your computer every so often, because you have all these memory leaks out there. You got these bad C++ programmers out there, or C# programmers out there that aren't freeing their memory.
Yeah. So we have a while block, and what's going to happen here? It's looking for a Boolean value, and the Boolean value is being returned by this operator. And operators are sort of like functions. I actually learned this from you, Kurt. You've got these operators are sort of like functions, and what comes in before and what comes after are actually parameters being passed into this function.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
And so anyway, we'll find out if they go ahead. Okay, now I can't hear you. You must have hit your microphone.
If you're a Power Apps programmer, you'll notice that not equal, that bang operator, that is in Power Apps as well. Just want to point that out.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to run this, and you can imagine we've got this variable that's been set up as a new one. So if we try to do a toString on this, I'd imagine it would be a blank string. So we go in here, and so that's going to be, this is going to return a false because it's blank. There's nothing in there. So we'll at least have the message box show up once, and then it will continue to go through the loop until we click on yes. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Sometimes compiling takes a while. What was the longest compile time you've ever had?
I used to go out and shoot baskets with my son while I could put something on compile. We used to go play hacky sack while we're compiling. It would take 20, 30 minutes.
In a work office, you are allowed to goof off and do like little Star Wars, like you got some like lightsabers or your horse playing in the office, and the boss comes out like, "Hey guys, like, could you be doing something better with your time?" And the programmer's like, "Compiling," and the boss are like, "Okay, proceed."
Because it's such a frustrating experience.
Yeah, you can't do anything. You want the processor, the computer, just to put all of its resources into compiling the code. And if you're in there trying to write documents, sending emails, you're slowing the compiler down. So you want to walk away. Okay, so we've got this message box. I'm like, no, do doesn't stink. No, cancel. Get me out of here. And it's just going to be infinite loop until I say yes.
Nice.
And then the
Very
label
nice.
says yes.
Now, if we wanted to do good programming practices, that new dialog result, we should be putting an initial value in it. We shouldn't be assuming it's going to put anything in there like a blank. So usually a constructor is going to allow you to put an initializer in there, right? So you would be able to put maybe you could start it off with a dialog of no. I don't know what that value would be. A no dialog box.
In this case, it has a constructor, and that's it. There's no overloaded anything. But if we wanted to, we could say the result dot, I don't even know. I don't even think that equals function will allow us to assign anything.
Yeah, usually, so there's that. So you don't usually you put the initial value that you want into the constructor in the parentheses right there. You would put
So if I try to put an empty string, look, I got an error, and it's saying does not contain a constructor that takes one argument. So if I go in here and maybe it accepts two arguments.
Oh wow!
Nope. You see, there's no, like before with messagebox.show, there were 21 different ones for us to choose from.
Yeah.
Not possible.
Not in a dialog result, anyway. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. A lot of other objects would. But you see here, if I said, okay, well, this object should be do stinks. Little did I know when I got in trouble, 25 years later, I would be doing the do stinks again. Man, I got in trouble.
Indelible impression on you.
Yeah, the client came in. He didn't even go to my boss. He just walked up to my desk, and it was Searle, right?
Yeah, it was Jeff Kirby. I remember him. What a great guy he was, and that was a valuable lesson you learned too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Searle is they're engineers. I mean, Searle's over in Switzerland right now doing the particle accelerator, right? So is that an association globally of engineers? What exactly is Searle? I never knew that. I probably should have asked you that.
That is the research. It's the Civil Engineering Research Laboratories. So it is the research branch of the Army Corps of Engineers.
Oh, it's
It
a branch
they
of the military.
yeah, oh yeah. It's front end. It's the front end research. These guys
Really?
do the stuff that's never been done before. They were the first ones to do GPS. They were the first ones to do lots of things. In fact, and that was so cool because I got to work with a company that used to do work with them, and I got to see the front end of all this new technology all the time. It was such an amazing place. And Jeff Kirby was an amazing man. He did the same thing to me one time. He got very angry at me because I had told him that and you've heard me say this many times, because I had a moment like you had with the doo-doo steaks with him, and and how he told it. He kind of got on you, right? And
Oh,
he
yeah.
did the same thing to me. I mean, think of it. You don't know me, dude. Who are you? But he literally would come in and he almost treated you like a son in that place at that point,
Yeah.
because he did the same thing to me. I told him that I would have something delivered by Monday, and I didn't. And he said, Kurt, you always follow through with what you say you're going to do. Always follow through. And I mean, he got on my butt about it. And you know what? I've lived that rule ever since then. Boy,
Yeah, he made me squirm. I mean, he addressed me with
Yeah.
a question.
yeah,
Hey, is doo-doo stinks? I got he printed out all the code
yeah,
of my program.
yeah.
And he says, looks like here you initialize a variable to doo-doo stinks. Is that standard procedure for this company? Are you representing, the correct policies and procedure for this company that we gave you $1 million contract with, or how much ever it was?
Yeah, it was $1 million. Yeah, it was big money. Yeah.
This is the first time since that moment I've ever done this again. But now that I'm the CEO, I guess I could.
Yeah, but you're doing it in memory of it. It's a little bit different now. But
Yeah, that's true.
You know what? People like that, they're amazing people, man. And yeah. What a great guy. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. So the C in Searle is civil, meaning they're not military, but it's like a non-military grouping under a military entity. Did you say Army or just military?
Army Corps of Engineers. So the civil engineers. They're even Army and all military has civil engineers. Civil engineering doesn't mean you're not in the military. It means that you're working with the civilian side of types of things like housing, like bridges, roofs on buildings, things that aren't really military. Now the civil engineers are the ones that will build the runways for the military. They'll build that stuff for them. But
so the engineers in Searle, they're not in the military, you talk about these people called civilians.
Yeah.
So these engineers are actually civilians, right?
Yeah, that they are. There's. I don't remember if there was any Army in their military. I'm sure there was, because they were government employees. But they were the branch that would actually do the research for them, and they put it in Champaign. They put that branch in Champaign because you had that melting pot, that huge melting pot of people getting their doctorate degrees in engineering, and the University of Illinois is a major engineering place, right? So Searle was a really good spot for that, or Champaign was a good spot for Searle.
Yeah. So we learned a valuable lesson for this particular object. We can't initialize it.
That's really there's not within the constructor anyway, huh?
You know what I could do? I could say yes, but then that would, or we could do no or whatever. So if let's see what's possible here. So I tried to do a string in there. Of course, it's an object, not a string. So if I say yes, well, that's the actual result. So maybe, if this is true, this loop the message box won't even show up if this actually works. Let's sort of test that out there.
And that's going to be stronger code than guessing whether or not you're going to. It should be not no.
So what we have is essentially a bug, because we initialized it to what we're looking for. So if you want to initialize it, here are your options: cancel, parse, abort. So this is good. Like we could, if you want to initialize this to abort, notice we have yes, no, cancel. It should never be abort. And that's what you told me about initializing your variables back in the day. You said, Darren, If it's an integer, they're initialized to negative 47. If I ever see a negative 47 on any report or blah, 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 then I know that the variable wasn't even touched, which sort of helps you debug. Now, the question is, what if you actually had a negative 47 that was a real value, but
You got to make sure that that's not something that you would use. Yeah. But that's a beautiful, that's a perfect initialization there, Darren, because there's no way that's going to be a yes. And like you say, if it comes up somewhere in the program later on with an abort, you know that you did that. You're like, oh, that means I'm not touching that thing. That's great programming practice right there.
Yeah. Okay, so we did a loop, and really what I'm thinking is the next thing that you should be considering is what video should you watch next?
Thinks you're going to like this video next. Let's see if they're right. Or you can select this playlist, which I've selected for you based on the content you're currently watching. Guys, gotta hurry, click one of them. Otherwise, YouTube's going to autoplay some other video, which you probably don't want.
Darren, who's got